All right, good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order public meeting number 132 of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. It's August 21, 2014. We're at the Boston Convention Center and Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. And we're going to deal this morning with Region A matters first, and therefore Chairman Crosby is going to join us when we've concluded those matters. We have two items on the agenda with respect to that, and the first item is a new qualifier, and Director Wells from the Investigation and Enforcement Bureau will present a report.
Thank you.
Good morning, Director
Good morning,
Wells.
Commissioners.
Good morning.
On the agenda this morning are the results of the suitability investigation for an additional Mohegan Sun, Massachusetts qualifier, Kevin Peter Brown. Kevin Brown is the chairman of the Mohegan Tribal Council as of October 7th, 2013. Mr. Brown submitted all required forms to the IEB, and our investigators conducted a rigorous background check, including the areas of employment history, his criminal record, education, directorships and shareholder interests, civil litigation, bankruptcies, property ownership, political contributions, references and media coverage. Investigators also conducted a financial responsibility evaluation, and the results of that were extremely positive. Mr. Brown was approved on March 13, 2014 by licensure by the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement. In addition to what is in your report, he has also been approved for licensure by the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board on June 11th of 2014 and approved in June of this year by the Florida Parimutuel Division. Mr. Brown graduated from the United States Military Academy, West Point, with a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering with an aerospace concentration in 1987. He also obtained a master's degree in Operations Research and Systems Analysis from the Naval Postgraduate School in 1996. He further obtained an additional master's degree in Public Diplomacy from Norwich University in 2009. And he is currently completing his doctoral program in security studies from Kansas State University. Mr. Brown's employment history shows his longtime military service leading up to his rank of colonel as a garrison commander. He also served as an assistant instructor in history at the Barton County Community College and as the director of military housing for Place Properties in Atlanta, Georgia. Leading up to his appointment as tribal chairman, he worked as a military consultant at Kids Peace and Teen Central in Pennsylvania, and then as a business consultant at the Boston Minority Development Agency. Through the course of the investigation, Mr. Brown has demonstrated by clear and convincing evidence that he is suitable for licensure in Massachusetts, and therefore the IEB is recommending that this commission find him suitable. The report has been given to you for your consideration.
All right, Director Wells, thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Hard to ask a question on this particular qualifier. Just to comment that he's a very impressive individual.
He is.
Other thoughts, questions, comments?
No, I agree with Commissioner Cameron. Remind me, Director, we did the bulk of this investigation like we've been doing in the recent past internally, is that correct?
That is correct, so, and we will continue to do that going forward.
Thank you.
No, I thought that was an important point to emphasize. We're now, we've got a terrific team,
Yes.
and we've basically transferred from outside consultants to our internal team the responsibility for doing these kinds of things. Is that right?
That is correct, and I'll point out we also have our new financial investigator here with us this morning, Vanessa Orso, who is going to be working on these going forward.
Great, welcome. All right, I think we need a vote on this.
That's correct.
So I'd entertain a motion to find Chairman Brown qualified.
Gladly, I would make a motion that this commission find Mr. Kevin Peter Brown suitable as recommended by the Investigations and Enforcement Bureau and in the report submitted herein.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Director Wells. All right, the second and final item on the Region A agenda this morning is a discussion of the process that we'll use when we begin in 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, with the Region A licensing hearings. And those hearings, of course, are hearings that will be conducted as we have done all of the licensing hearings thus far in a public setting. So I'm going to ask Executive Director Day to outline the process that he and the staff recommend, and then we'll have a conversation about it, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and the like. So, Director Day.
Thank you, Commissioner McHugh. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
If I could refer you to, it's item 2B in your packet. It's titled Issuance of Category 1 License Region A. What it is the, as Commissioner McHugh mentioned, it's the proposed process planning chart that we have used. We used before with the slot parlor selection when the Commission was going through that process. And it's the process, of course, is scheduled to begin, as Commissioner McHugh mentioned, on September 8th. I'd like to mention at least one thing that might be different than what we've seen oftentimes. As you'll see with the chart, it actually lists steps as opposed to particular days or dates. And the reason for that is because this process, the focus is on the process and the information needed during the process, recognizing that it's a complex process with the length of interviews, the length of applicant information, length of the reports will all vary. So it's very difficult, of course, to predict exactly how long the process itself might take. If you begin on step 1, I'm just going to, I know the commissioners have this, so I'm just going to try and hit on a couple of some points as I go through each section. Although there's a lot of important points, so it may seem like I'm reading the document itself. But first, of course, after it begins on September 8th, probably one of the most important sections, the Commission revisits the suitability from IAB on the applicants. Commission plans, of course, starting with the building and site design report and then the finance report. Then the commissioners, as they move through, and we'll see that that's noted in all the commission reports, as the commissioners move through their reports, they will recommend potential conditions as part of their evaluation. During the process, staff will be making a running list of those conditions, and we'll also, as time wears on, we've always invited the applicants if they see some kind of alleged material error to let staff know, and we'll be documenting those particular concerns, and we'll be reflecting them later to the process and the commissions. After the finance evaluation report, we anticipate the mitigation report, then the economic development report, and again the same process during there with the potential conditions and any alleged material errors. In step 3, the commissioners, and this is a little different from what we've done as far as procedure-wise. Commissioners will present the overview report. In this case, the commissioners have allocated the questions between each of you, and the concept is the commissioners will report. The overview report will still be a separate report, and the commissioners will report on each question that they have individually been assigned. Following those individual presentations, the commission will then essentially deliberate on that particular report, but will determine a final evaluation rating. So during the reports by the commissioner, there won't be a final evaluation rating for that category. Concept is that would take place with the commission as a group after those reports on the overview section have been delivered. Again, then following that section, anticipate staff will be able to report on the alleged material errors, that at least the information that's been gathered at that point. And in step 4, we'll finish up any more information on the material errors and provide any information the commission has requested in response to those. And of course, the commission would have an opportunity then to make any changes they would deem as a result of the reports they have received. Here, after that, the staff would have the opportunity and its consultants for any additional conditions if there was something that the staff felt needed to be moved forward. We've talked about the staff creating a list of all the conditions at this point. We've had all the presentations, all the information has come forward, and the conditions. Staff will have a list. The commission will review that list, and then we'll decide what it's comfortable with to be on that list. The commission at that point will vote, but it will vote to have the staff ask about the selected conditions that the commissioners have determined they're comfortable with at that point. Will not be a vote of approval on the conditions themselves. At that point, of course, the staff will present those conditions back to the applicants for their comments. The commission, as it does that, of course, reserves the right to change, amend, add conditions from that process as the reports and progress goes further. Each applicant will then be advised, these are, of course, the conditions that apply, and the commission will set a time limit and will ask for a response from the applicants in writing on those particular conditions. Staff, the evaluation, the meeting itself will most likely be recessed in that process somewhere to allow time for the applicants to respond. Staff will receive the written responses in step 6. The written responses will be displayed to the commission, of course, and posted to the commission's website. And at this point also, the commission may decide that it wants the applicant to come before it and later and answer specific questions if necessary. When the meeting reconvenes, those questions and that information will then come back to the commission. And at that point, the commission, the idea is all the reports, all the conditions, the responses to the conditions are before the commission, and the commission would begin its deliberations on the agreement to award the license. As part of the deliberation, the commission determines if the conditions agreed to, modified, or requested by the applicant would be acceptable, or whether the additional conditions need to be added, amended, or modified for each applicant. Then, of course, in step 8, the commission selects the applicant for agreement to award the license and votes on final conditions. That, of course, information then comes to the applicant, and the applicant then in the final step, step 10, appears before the commission to indicate whether it agrees to enter into the agreement to award the license. And that's at least the process that the proposed process that we've outlined at this point for the commission's consideration.
Very helpful, very helpful. Comments, questions, thoughts from any members of the commission?
Yeah, I have a comment. So there is a bigger role for the applicant in this process, and I'm sure we will be getting feedback. Is that what we're anticipating on maybe the time frame that the applicant will need to respond appropriately? Is that what we would anticipate?
Mr. Ziemba and I have reached out to the applicants to ask them to consider what possible timeframes. I don't know that we will know that exactly until the applicants see what the conditions are, but we do think there's some time frame, and we're going to continue to work on trying to refine that a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Just a matter of clarification, the first bullet under step 4, when we receive information back on any alleged material errors, is the next sentence, the commission reviews the information. Are we collectively potentially reassigning a ranking on a category, or unclear as to what that next step in the process is?
When the material error information comes back, the commission will be able to look at it and review it. If the information indicates that there should be a change in a report, then the commission could do that. Our experience in past reviews and evaluations, we haven't had anything quite like that, but we leave the possibility open for the case where really we might want to do that. So you'd need to deliberate and go over your report if that was the case.
Okay. If it's a question of material within a category that one of us has been assigned, do we look to that individual commissioner to lead the discussion or make a recommendation to his or her colleague?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
And that has been a past practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we've always reserved, as I understood it, and we've never done it, but I think we've always understood that the rankings of, and ratings, I should say, they're not rankings, the ratings in the reports were the ratings of the individual, recommended by the individual commissioner, and if the commission disagreed with those ratings, the commission could change them. And it could provide a good discussion point, and it has done that in the past without actually changing the rating. So that part is not, that part is just exactly the same as the process we've used in the past.
That's right.
Yeah,
Commissioner Zuniga?
we've always termed those the provisional ratings. Can I go back to step 4, just for clarification, where it says the commission reviews the list of proposed conditions. You know, this is after the staff and consultants present conditions it deems appropriate. It's understood that it's not the running list of conditions necessarily that the staff keeps through the 4 presentations, correct? It could be additional, it could be less.
It will be, it will include the running list that we keep. It can be more. The commission will review those conditions, and then they can remove them as they see fit. They will be, at this point, more broad conceptual type conditions. So that's what the commission will be looking at and determining when they instruct staff to go out with that list, what that list really should be. But they'll be more broad and conceptual.
Right. But it is until this point on step 4 that we really start, quote unquote, deliberating as to whether the rest of the commissioners feel comfortable with those conditions presented by each of the individual commissioners, if any.
Yes, that's the
Correct.
first step, yes.
Because during the presentations, they're only presented as potential and just left out there. They go in the list. They come back on step 4 to really be deliberated upon.
That's right. As you present your reports, what we do as staff is make a list of the things that you particularly call out as conditions, but we also try to add anything that we think looks like you're thinking about a condition, so the list will be probably longer than it needs to be at the end of the day.
Right.
And then you'll have your discussion about what you want on that list or not, so.
Right. Okay.
So the list, I think that's an important point that Commissioner Zuniga touched on. The list would include all of the commissioners' recommendations with the possibility of additional things that the staff thinks the commissioners ought to consider.
That's right.
Right.
Correct, and I think during the previous discussions, the commissioners have also taken the opportunity to make a decision to withdraw one of those conditions. So, you know, if that would take place, then
Yeah, but that would be the commission's decision, not staff's decision.
no, it would be the
Right.
commissioner's decision.
Right,
That's
right,
right.
right. Commissioner Zuniga?
Yeah, no, and the way, hypothetically, some of these could be broad and some of these could be specific. I'm thinking of just by loss of averages, that could be the case. And maybe it is until this point with the recommendations with the help of consultants and staff that those things could be refined. If it's too broad, we might need to refine it. If it's too specific, we could also do the same.
So I guess we'll make our presentations on our category, and then questions will be asked at that time to clarify, but we would hold discussion on the conditions until step 4.
I think
That's
that's
it.
right. I think generally, yes.
Well, that raises a sort of thematic thing that it seems to me we need to clarify here and understand. This, as I understand it, is a structure. It's not a step-by-step necessarily guide to exactly how this is going to flow, because this is a dynamic process that is going to have some situational content and some situational processes. By that I mean, if there is some ambiguity in a condition, to pick up on Commissioner Cameron's point, that a commissioner presents, it'd be certainly appropriate for questions to be taken right then so that the staff could write it down correctly. I suspect not many of these complex things are going to come out of the air from nowhere. But it seems to me we've got to be prepared to do that. and save perhaps the full discussion, or the fuller or most thorough discussion until step 4, until we have them all on the table. But is that consistent with your understanding of what this is?
Commissioner McHugh, that's similar to how the practice has gone when we've actually had the opportunity to do it, is there's discussion around as Commissioner Cameron and the other commissioners deliver the reports, there's questions about that, and questions about the conditions at that point as well. So they're all preliminary, and then the whole process is designed to inform that final list, so the commissioners have all the information before they make a deliberation or make a decision on which list to send staff forward with.
Yeah, so, and certainly the applicants can see what's coming and begin to think about it as it comes and begin to comment on it as they get a heads up as to what's coming. So even though the final list won't come till step 4. It seems to me, stepping back from this, and I want to follow up with a few more questions on just on the thematic component of this, that we basically have 4 elements, and they're the same elements that we've had in the past. We have the reports and presentations. We have the solicitation of concerns about material inaccuracies, if there are some, and in each case we've had some concerns about material inaccuracies. Sometimes we thought that the assertion that there was a material inaccuracy was warranted and corrected it, sometimes not, but we've solicited that. Deliberations on conditions, on the whole process, and the award, and the finality of the award at the end. And this isn't intended to do anything other than get us through in a little bit more detail those 4 steps, if I read this correctly.
Commissioner McHugh said that's correct. The concept is just to do our best to make sure we didn't miss something in that process,
Right.
to make sure we have
Right.
we've covered everything that we can think of going into the process.
Right. In most cases, much of this is done by staff or by the commission in working sessions out of the public eye. But we're doing it here, as we have the others, in the public eye. And this one's a little bit more complicated because we don't have a surrounding community agreement in one major area. So some of this is more complicated than we've done in the past, but the principles are exactly the same. I had a couple of more detailed questions. With respect to step 1, the staff will collect, let me put it another way. As I understand it, the applicant listening to the presentations and reading the report is free to approach staff at any time, and staff would be you and Ombudsman Ziemba, or anybody else you publicly designate, but I assume it's going to be one of you, with concerns about the accuracy of anything they see or hear as it occurs. And the reason we're waiting till Wednesday or step 3, step 4, to actually discuss them is so that everybody has time to think them through. But that doesn't mean they have to wait to any specified time to give information to you. Is that right?
That's correct. They can approach us at any time while the reports are being presented or afterward. It really doesn't matter, and it's not limited to the report that was presented right before. So if they come to us the next day for a report the day before, that's fine too.
In step 3, we talk about the individual presentations of segments of the overview report, and then talk about deliberating on the overall overview rating. Then that doesn't preclude us, if we feel it's appropriate, to defer that discussion until the beginning of the overall deliberations, right? I mean,
That's right.
presumptively, we're going to do it then, but like all other pieces of this, I take it that's flexible, and if we collectively want to do it later, for some reason, we reserve the right to do it.
Which would be my preference, by the way, but we could always,
Right.
get to that,
Right.
cross that bridge when we get there.
Right. It might be that it just feels right to do it then, might
Yep.
be that it feels right to do it later.
Right.
Yeah, right. Because the overview might ultimately take into account the reaction to some of the conditions we're imposing.
Precisely.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So that's why it's important to stress that this is a guide rather than a prescription. It seems to me. Now, the piece about, in step 3, I said step 4 a minute ago, step 3, the staff will then present the alleged material errors to the commission in step 3. I hadn't thought about this before when I first looked at this. Is there any reason why the staff can't present, at least in writing, assertions of material error at the beginning of each day, for example, so that commissioners could be thinking about them, even though we're not perhaps going to discuss them until we get to step 3, or give the assertion to consultants for their input so that we can proceed in an informed fashion when we get to step 3 and the time for discussing them arises.
So the practice that we've had in the past is when we get an allegation of a material error, we provide that directly to the commissioner that has been responsible for that specific area as soon as we get it.
Right.
And so that we can begin working on any response to that issue as quickly as we can. And then we also circulate that to the consultants and other staff that have been involved with that area. So in practice, what we will do is we will put that forward to the specific commissioner as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, that'd be great, because some of these may take a little investigation, and we want to be able to deal with them in a thoughtful fashion when the time comes to do so.
And where we say staff presentation, in practice, in reality, has been the commissioner that has been in charge of that specific area that has addressed the alleged material error at the time that we go over that. So I'm not exactly sure it'll be a presentation by staff, but we can present anything that has been put forward in writing.
Sure, great. If we get, when we get to step 4, the process of approving the conditions is that the commission doesn't vote on the conditions, but votes on conditions to send to the applicant. Let's just talk a little bit about what that means. Why that? I think I understand, but I think it'd be helpful, since we are discussing this, for everybody to understand why we're doing that.
So the thought behind that is that at that point in time, the conditions are in a broad, more conceptual form. The commission still has the right to add, amend, modify those conditions. Really, what we're doing at this point is you're authorizing staff to go back and start a conversation about those conditions and get the feedback from the applicant. So it's not as much about the actual conditions and what they are at that point, but that you're asking staff to go back and solicit input. Because there is a recognition that there will be more discussion, your deliberations will inform the conditions as you move forward, and that there may be changes based both on your deliberations and on the input that you receive on those conditions.
In some other situations and contexts that we've looked at, the process involves, the process of getting to the end involves at least 2 steps. One is sort of a term sheet kind of thing, in which there are terms of the whatever it is at a conceptual level for discussion by the parties. And then once the terms at that level are agreed on, then the more detailed process of reducing them to writing begins, and the writing becomes the final agreement. Is that similar to what's envisioned by the process outlined in step 4?
It is. Staff is working now on the format for that kind of a term sheet type condition list. And the idea would be that the term sheet would have the basic conceptual terms. But then they would have to be crafted, once they're specific, into a form of agreement like we did for MGM. So there'll be a sort of a term sheet first and then an actual agreement that has more of the specific language, once you've determined what that should be.
Any thoughts or discussions on that? This is the first time we've really done that. So if there's any discussion or thought about that, now's the time to do
So, in the written response back from the applicant with regard to the conditions, we would anticipate a signing an agreement, or that would be later?
That's later.
Okay.
That comes
So
at
this
the
would
end.
just be a response to the conditions that we
Yes.
would be looking for?
In all other cases that we've had, the conditions, this is just my take on it, so jump in. The conditions that we've had have been relatively minor. They, not maybe to the applicants, but they've been relatively minor, because the essential framework of the proposal has been worked out through the host community agreement, the application, and the surrounding community agreement. So that three-legged stool has been the package with which the commission was presented. And therefore, what we were about with our conditions is sort of an interstitial filling in of gaps. Here, we, in one case, only have two legs of that stool. And so we have to contemplate creating that third leg. And this kind of flexibility is, I take it, designed to allow us to create that in a manner that we can talk about, because we can't immediately proceed to a fully panoplied description of what a condition might entail without first agreeing on what conceptually that condition is. Have I articulated that?
Yes, I think that's correct. That's definitely what it is. The conditions may require better language drafting. They will probably be different sometimes than what we've seen in the past. And so in order to do that, we want to have the flexibility to get some input first, come back, do some drafting, and then come back again.
Thoughts?
But that would be for both applicants, though. Even though one is missing this, the surrounding community agreement, we would obviously have a similar process for both applicants.
Yes, there'll be a term sheet for both, yes.
Right. Oh, yeah, this has got to be a mirror image of each other.
Because of that, if the condition is, if there's one condition that's similar to both applicants, how do we ensure that there's not a, or maybe there is, a, I'm gonna best my position because the other applicant is accepting or not accepting, or the term, the specific term, assuming that both conditions are equal for both applicants?
A lot of the conditions that we have will be standard. We've had a fairly set of conditions through our prior evaluation. So those conditions will most likely stay the same. Other conditions will be specific to the particular applicant. So we'll have, if that situation arises, we'll have to look at it and give it some thought. But it may not come up because the boilerplate type conditions will be the same, and we're not likely to change those for one over another. Specific conditions may require some more drafting to fit the applicant. So, but if that happens, we'll have to look at it. We'll get their input on that, and then the commission will consider it.
Okay.
And in regard to timing, both applicants will be required to respond at exactly the same time, and nothing will be made public until they're both presented to the commission. And so that one applicant can't see a response to conditions of the other before they're made public to the commission, to avoid any potential issue such as you discussed.
Okay.
And I think the final step in that process too is it's written, So the applicants have to respond to those conditions in writing, and it's up to the commission whether or not to request additional information directly from the applicant.
Fair enough.
And that's all designed to level the playing field.
That's correct.
Right. Right. Further comments on that piece? Okay. In step 8, there is in the second sentence, as part of the deliberations, commission determines if conditions as agreed to, modified, or rejected by the applicant would be acceptable, or whether conditions need to be added, amended, or modified for each applicant. Is it anticipated if the latter clause is invoked, i.e. there's additions, amendments, or modifications, that there'll be an opportunity for the applicant to comment on the proposed addition, amendment, or modification?
We didn't build in an additional step for that, but we certainly could do that if the commission thought that was appropriate.
It may be that some are technical, but it also may be that at that stage, something comes up that it wasn't anticipated before, that first back and forth may generate some kind of something that hadn't been contemplated before that really does need another interaction. So at least we maintain the flexibility to that, recognizing that this is overall a process designed to be both transparent and fair and get the input from the applicants as we move forward so nobody's blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't proceed on the assumption that something is acceptable if in fact it's not, to the fullest extent possible. And then finally, in step 10, I take it the anticipation is we have exactly the same ending as we've had before. That is, an authorized person on behalf of the applicant sits down with the commission and signs a document that is the ultimate agreement to license.
Yes, that's what we anticipate.
Okay.
In thinking through all these steps and possibilities, I think it was wise to lay this out in steps rather than days, because it really does, when you look at the complicated process, it would be really hard to predict exactly which day will be on which step. So, you know, that's, I believe what you're trying to articulate by giving us steps as opposed to days.
Commissioner Cameron, that's the idea. It's also the recognition, as you just mentioned, of the complexity of both projects and the competitive nature of both of those projects. Is it may very well take time to get a clear understanding of what those conditions and what each of the evaluation reports say. So I think concept is to make sure the process is flexible, to be able to take different steps along the way if you need it.
So although we've been saying the 12th, that it would be wise to say that may not be the case because of this, the complexity.
I think, at least from the approach here, it seems very clear that we've got that week targeted, but in the end, the process is designed to allow the time the commission needs to garner the information and to get appropriate responses from the applicants with the complex reports and conditions that are there. So I think the concentration is on the best result from the Commonwealth as opposed to a particular day.
I would agree.
That's really an important point. We've said and maintained that we're starting on the 8th. We are starting on the 8th. We've said and we're finishing on the 12th. We're going to make the award on the 12th. We'll try to do that. But if we don't do that because we're trying to ensure that we get the best result for the Commonwealth, we'll continue with perhaps pauses to have these back and forths with the applicants straightforward until we do finish. If that takes a few extra days, so be it. But the object is to ensure that we have a fair, transparent process that results in the best value for the Commonwealth. And this is designed to assist us in doing that. Okay, further thoughts or things that you think we should be thinking about? Any of the three of you? Okay. Further comments from commissioners? All right, I would just like I don't think we need a vote for this. This is a procedural guideline, a procedural outline, a concept, rather than a formal requirement. And if there is no significant comment at this point, I sense a consensus that's formed around this with the understanding that it is flexible and designed to be utilitarian rather than prescriptive.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I, of course, keep thinking of how all of this applies to a lot of the topics that I've been immersed in the finance category, and I think the general framework is, as I would characterize it, flexible enough so that it fits all the categories, not just the one I'm thinking about, and that. Like we've done in almost every regulation that we write, there's enough flexibility afforded to this board, and all the deliberations happen in the public eye, and it's all on the record. So I think it's a great framework.
I would agree, and thank you. This is a well-thought-out process. Much appreciated.
Indeed it is, and we look forward to getting it started. I suspect we're not alone in that.
We're not.
So I think I think it's good. I think we'll proceed, and again, thank you for your thoughtful work. That ends, unless there's something else, Director Day, in the Region A category. That finishes the Region A agenda. General Counsel Blue, Ombudsman Ziemba. So I think we'll take a brief recess now, see if we can find, I know we'll be able to find Chairman Crosby, and we'll resume in about 10 minutes with the rest of the agenda. Yes, sir.
All right, we are ready to reconvene public meeting 132 at about 11:25. And we will pick up with the second order of business, which is approval of minutes. Commissioner McHugh.
All right, we have two sets of minutes in the materials, I believe, Mr. Chairman. First, the July 15 minutes, and I would move their approval in the form that they are in the materials with the customary reservation of power to correct typographical errors and spellings and the like, mechanical errors.
Can I correct one quick one? It's actually the July 2nd
I'm sorry. July.
meetings,
Yeah, yeah.
just for the
Right.
record that
Right.
the agenda had a typo.
Yep.
But we still haven't got July 15th, right? They were going to come up this week. I don't know what happened to July 15th.
We in fact did do July 15th. We have been mistakenly referring to the 2nd as the 15th. We had a number of extra meetings that month, and
okay.
sometimes I get a little confused in the legal department, so, but they are in fact the July 2nd, and I do believe we've done July 15th.
Oh,
already.
all right, fine. Okay.
So these, yeah, right. Okay. Right.
Second?
Wait a minute, we don't have a motion yet.
Oh, I thought you just
Oh,
made
I
one.
did make a
You
motion.
did.
It's only 10:30.
How quickly they
It's only
forget.
11:30. That's not a
Don't
good
lose
sign.
confidence in Commissioner McHugh's judgments. Who's bidding on Region A? No. Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
That was made.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
They are accepted unanimously.
And then the second set is the August 7 minutes, and I'd make the same motion. That is the approval with the usual reservation of power to correct typographical and mechanical error.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it unanimously. We will move on to the third item on the agenda, administration, I guess the fourth item. Executive Director Day.
Thank you, Chairman Crosby. And I have just one initial note as we start from the general side, is that on behalf of the Racing Division, I'd like to note that Back to the Track event at Plain Ridge Race Course will begin Saturday and will be held Saturday and Sunday, August 23rd, 3rd, and 24th, and begins with barn tours Saturday at noon.
What is the Back to the Track event?
It's a promotional event, and it starts with tours of the barn, and they do it every year.
For anybody, for the public?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
Sounds like fun.
It does. And then with that, if it's all right, Chairman Crosby, I'd just go to the item 4B, which is a policy delegation and approval section. And the first item under 4B. What you see there is a delegation to allow me to sign approved policies, make non-material changes to previously approved policies, and implement a 90-day interim policy if it is needed. That's brought forth by our Chief Counsel, Catherine Blue, who I'll look over to see if she has comments.
The purpose of this delegation is to allow the efficient implementation of what is generally HR policies, but can be other administrative policies. And you'll see a number of them come before you today. The idea is that if those policies previously approved need some small non-material changes, the executive director can do that. Also, if there's a need for an interim policy, that he can put something in place and then get a formal policy before you for approval. So it's just a much more efficient way to get the policies implemented and in place.
In this case, could you give me an example of a non-material change?
So say, for example, we have an internal policy that has a certain number of days attached to it. If we wanted to shorten that period or lengthen that by a little bit, it might be a non-material change and the executive director could do it. Or if we needed to add, say, another category of employee to it, that we could do that so they would be covered immediately.
Okay.
Absolutely correct a typo or a reference as well.
I think it's straightforward, but we would want to be apprised of whatever those steps were. Any steps that were taken under this authority, we would want to be apprised of them, ex post facto probably, but be apprised.
We could report on it after the fact, yes.
Yeah. Okay, any further discussion? We have a motion.
I move that the commission delegate the authority to the executive director to sign and approve changes to previously approved administrative and human resources policies.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item before you is our first attempt, hopefully it'll be better than an attempt, but our first set of policies and that the high-performance team is bringing before you. The idea here is this is the first time we've actually had the presentation of policies specifically. What we anticipated is that Ed Burke and Joan, who are here with us as well today to present the policies, is that we would concentrate on it'll do a little update on the project itself, but also concentrate on the policy statement from each policy and refer to the commission. Each policy is in the appendix, and of course we'll all be taking any corrections or concerns or whatever the commission might have as we go forward with the policies. And then if it works, whatever set the commission would be interested in approving, then we could do that at the end of Ed's presentation. That's just a thought. Part of what we're here for today is to find out what works best with the commission to get these policies through, because we actually will have a larger set coming for you next time.
So what was the net of that? What's the proposal that you have on the table for how to move this forward?
Basically, that we'll present them, we'll actually have the policy statement and briefly review what the policy statement is, which is the basic reason we're trying to address what we're trying to address. Then we won't go over the entire policy itself. It is in your packets. Ed would just make sure that we're all on the same page, policy statement and policy. And then if the commission had questions or changes you wanted there, we'd make those as we went along. And then if the commission was comfortable to whatever set to approve at the end, do that after we had completed the
Okay.
discussion.
So we won't read through all the detailed policy, but we may have comments on it, which we'll bring up. Okay, fine.
Correct.
Great.
And with that, but please, as I'm sure you will, but let us know if there's some other mechanism or some other way that you need to get the information before you, so as we move forward, we can incorporate those changes too. And with that, Ms. Burke?
Good morning, Commissioners. How are you?
Morning.
As Executive Director Day mentioned, I'm joined this morning by Joan Kuhn. Joan is the Human Resources expert on our project team and will help me with any detailed questions that you have as we go forward. I'd like to start by just giving a quick review of where we've been to date and what we're bringing before you. Within the package, there's a few different things. I've got a workflow in terms of what we've already completed, a workflow of the policy development, which leads us up to this approval step. We have 14 policies before you this morning in the packet. As Director Day mentioned, we'll quickly go through the statements for each of these policies and then take any questions that you might have. And as he mentioned, we have two appendices. The first is the policy master list, which you approved last time. We're using that as a score sheet as we go, so you can keep track of which policies are in process, which have been reviewed through the high performance team, and which are now being brought to the commission. And then the second appendix is the policies themselves. So there's the full text of each policy is included in that section. There is a number of reference lines and signature lines at the end of each policy. We have them only on the first policy just in order to save space. We went over 20 pages as it was, but each policy will have the same references and signature blocks at the end of it. So if we look quickly at the first workflow, as you recall, we started by conducting an analysis of what policies were needed. We looked at peer agencies within the state. We looked at other gaming agencies around the country to come up with and we did a best practices review, including some from the private sector, which Joan was able to help us with, and basically came up with a policy master list which had three different components. Policies that currently exist in your handbook, which we will review to see if any changes are needed or improvements, but otherwise just reformat into the standard policy format. New policies, which we're developing from scratch, which is what we're going through this morning, and important policies, but policies which exist already at the state level, either at the Human Resources Division or the Group Insurance Commission, in which case we just refer the HR manager and interested parties to those policies there. So last time through, we created the policy format. We had reviewed that with the high performance team. We've mentioned that a few times, but just to remind everyone, the members of that team is Executive Director Day, Commissioner Zuniga, Commissioner Cameron, General Counsel Blue, Admin and Finance Director Lennon, Trupti Banda, who's the HR manager, Marianne Dooley, and Dean Ventola, as well as members of my team who participated in the process. So last time we were here, we brought you the policy master list, which gave us the list of policies we were going to review. We received approval on those. We also came up with a policy template, and that's what we're using to complete these policies. The next page is basically the process we've been taking for new policies. So what we've been doing is drafting those policies. There are 29 in all, and these are ones that we are drafting not from scratch. We're using, precedent and best practices, but they're new at least to the MGC. We start with a team, an HR review. The high performance team then formally meets and reviews each policy. And then with revisions, once those are approved, we bring them to you. We expect to be able to do this in two batches for the commission. The first one has 14, and the next one will have 15. So are there questions at this point? Or I can start
Go ahead.
going through the policies? Okay, what we have, the policy template includes a statement at the beginning of it. The statement gives the rationale for why the policy exists, the important aspects of the policy, in general, who it applies to, and major components of it. So it's, if you will, an executive summary of the policy. So what I've done is, with Joan's help, we've put together the executive summaries of each of the 14 here. The first one is employment at will. And as you can read in this, basically it says that all personnel employed by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission are employed at will by the commission for indefinite periods. As such, they are subject to termination for any reason, and that the policies and practices of the MGC are not intended to create a more permanent relationship between the organization and its employees.
Questions? How does it square with union rules? At the moment, we're not union, but it's probably in the wind.
I believe that the union would kind of trump this policy.
Yeah, so it seems to me there ought to be something. It's sort of silly to have a policy that says we're one thing when in fact we're not going to be
But
that
if we're
thing.
not unionized, why would we want to reference that this policy doesn't apply currently? If we became unionized, if you became unionized, then we would have to kind of
Go back and
relook
change
at this. But this would, then we would say it applies only to non-union employees. So
Right.
we'd change the applicability.
Right, okay. So we could either do that now, or do it later on if we are unionized.
Right. I would suggest that you might not want to do it now, because then you're just pointing up that you are without a union and might intrigue some people to think about why
Well,
would I do that.
I don't think it's going to go unnoticed.
It's really at your option.
Yeah.
We're easy either way.
By the way, we've had this from the beginning. This
Yes,
statement. What the team here has done is presented a process for and a sample of some of the policy statements that then can translate into specific policies in the format that we've
The
always.
statement is throughout
yeah.
your employee handbook.
Right.
Right, okay. Anything else? Next.
Okay, the next one is the initial review period. Basically, this says the Mass Gaming Commission has a 90-day initial review period at the beginning of each term of employment for each employee. Basically, it's an opportunity for the employee to learn about the position, for the supervisors to work with the employee, to get comfortable with them. And it is essentially, in addition to the normal employee appraisal process, provides a review point at the end of 90 days to say, how are things going? Are there areas for improvement? And from the employee side, are you comfortable with your position? Do you have questions, et cetera?
Now, Ed and John, remind me, this was not explicit in the prior employee handbook. So this is an example of something that has
Yes.
surfaced out of the
Yes.
process that you've helped us
Right,
with.
kind of looking at best practice.
That's right.
That's right. And as you pointed out, the prior one, the employment at will, it existed as a statement in the orientation package. There was a signature,
Form.
The policy was to be reviewed and signed by people as they were employed, but it was not in a formal policy, and we formalized that.
That's right.
Is the 90 days consistent with other state agencies?
I did look at HRD, and they talk about 3 months.
Not all state agencies use it, but it is not uncommon to have this sort of,
It's usually 60 or 90, one of the...
yeah.
At least I can speak to the private sector. It's generally 90, and it's that point in time where, while both the employee and the manager are assessing, is this a good fit? And if in fact at the end of 90 days you determine it's not a good fit, people kind of walk away without a negativity added to their record.
Okay.
Well, in the second paragraph on the full form, it says employees may be terminated without warning, notice, or pay in lieu of notice. That's not a phrase I'm familiar with. What does that mean?
Some organizations will we'll give you 2 weeks, go away. So that's pay in lieu of notice. So we want you to leave today, but to make it kind of a little less onerous, and they'll give you some additional money. And that's,
making no-
that's not a given, that's a determination that would be made at the time.
Right. May be terminated, right, okay. Others? Next.
Okay, the next one is corrective action. This policy outlines a process for dealing with issues with employees where there may be a question as to whether duties are being performed in a satisfactory manner, whether they're following MGC policies, whether there are other issues like that. In those situations, there is a process that is outlined in this policy for the supervisor in this case to go through a series of escalations to try to remedy the situation as it is. And this basically lays out the process for doing that. Again, this is a fairly common practice in most organizations. This is just a question of laying the ground rules for what type of documentation will be required and what the steps in the process will be.
Thoughts? This one, again, particularly on the fully fleshed out policy, makes a point of saying, however, notwithstanding this policy, a person may be terminated with no corrective action and no notice, and is kind of put in there in 2 or 3 different places. So what are we saying here? Are we saying that this is the better way to go if you can, but we're just not going to tie our hands and we're not giving up the opportunity?
It depends on the severity of the
Right.
problem and the offense. If someone is doing something that is illegal or is going to cause an immediate ethical concern for the commission, then this basically gives the director and the HR manager the discretion, and the legal counsel the discretion to bypass the corrective policy and go directly to termination.
Okay. This occurs in a couple of other places, but in this paragraph, it says, in the second paragraph, in the second sentence, I think it says, in those situations where employees fail to meet these expectations, corrective action will be taken. Okay, corrective action includes termination.
Yes,
Okay, so we're not.
that's
okay.
the ultimate corrective action.
Okay, got it.
But this invites, in each case in which termination is the remedy, a comparison to how the commission has acted in other similar situations. So by putting in this multi-step process, regardless of reserving the right to terminate without corrective action, we are in effect creating a code with practice as its text. And that code is available for use by anybody whom we terminate at any point in the future, right?
But I would hope that managers through training would be consistent. And my understanding is also, if a situation came before we're thinking of terminating this person, it goes to both the HR manager and to the executive director, who then could say, this is so inconsistent with what we've done, you need to follow the corrective action policy, you just can't leap to termination.
I would hope that too, but that does not mean that the person who is terminated would agree that that is what has happened. And in fact, we are creating, and I'm just saying this so we do this with our eyes open. We are creating a code to which we have to adhere. We do not have a free rein to terminate anybody at will under any circumstance we choose.
Right. But I would say this is best practice and leads to good employee relations.
I'm not weighing in on one side or the other. I just.
Right.
No, but I agree with
In light of the
yeah.
comments that we have an at-will policy here. I just want us all to understand that we have an at-will policy, but
Well, what does the but do? I had the same reaction. My reading of this, again, if you read the whole thing, not just the summary, was there are so many places in there where if you read the policy, it's clear that immediate termination is one of the options on the table within this corrective action policy. So I was originally concerned, are we establishing something that's going to get us in trouble? And then as I read it, I was thinking, well, it's so clear in so many places that immediate termination is part of this policy. It's not outside the policy. But Commissioner McHugh is raising it again, and I just wonder whether.
I think what would be helpful is termination, if you will, is the nuclear option. In other words, it's terminating the relationship of the employee with the MGC. This really deals with much more minor situations, people who are late showing up for work, people who might be rude to customers, any number of much more minor situations. So for the most part, this will be a way of correcting not major, but perhaps significant issues with employee performance that we're trying to deal with. So it provides a process for doing that. While at the same time, and I think as you point out, Chairman, the policy does remind you that the Mass Gaming Commission maintains a very high standard of ethics and code of conduct, et cetera, and that certain problems, certain issues will result in termination. So this doesn't always apply, but it applies to the less significant cases, if you will.
Well, nowhere
but-
does it say that. It doesn't say anything about degree of severity. It makes it completely up to the manager and HR and up to MGC to determine which corrective action is appropriate, and one of the corrective actions is termination. There's no guidance in there about severity.
That's correct. It leaves it at the discretion of the executive director and the HR manager.
And that's where I just want everybody to understand that consistency is essential. If somebody shows up drunk for work, just to take a hypothetical, and that person is sent home and told to sober up and come back tomorrow, and then 2 months later, somebody shows up for drunk for work and is suspended for a week, there's a litigation problem. Let's be candid about that. And that's what this sets up. And so it emphasizes, and again, I'm being simply, so we have our eyes open here. This is a policy that has practice as a major text.
Which is appropriate, would you agree?
Yeah, but she said, would you agree? I mean, what is your judgment? Is this a good idea or not?
I think it is best practice, but it also requires a really rigorous adherence to uniform policies, and it is going to lead to litigation. There's no way around it. I mean, so I just point out both of those things.
Okay.
All three of those things. It's best practice. It needs, it's good for employees. It's good for the organization. It's not the only way to go. It requires a rigorous adherence to consistency, and it is going to lead to litigation. Those are the pieces.
It is or it might.
It is.
If there is rigorous adherence to consistency, it would still lead to litigation.
Consistency is inevitably in the eye of the beholder because these things are never exactly the same. So what's consistent from action A to action B when action A and B are not exactly the same?
Right. Well, the struggle
And I
that
think, just to finish that thought, I think the prospect of litigation is just a part of life. And, and the part of having a policy that tries to be even-handed and fair, because inevitably somebody's going to claim and have an ability to claim that you're not, you're not.
I would hold, I think a couple of observations. First of all, I agree with your concern about litigation. I think the risk of litigation exists whether this policy is here or not. In any case where you have had terminations, I think to a certain extent this provides some defense. So if someone, to use your example of someone showing up drunk, if someone shows up drunk, under this, they would be sent home, there would be a discussion with the supervisor of, you know, this is inappropriate and shall not continue, and there'll be a memorandum on that meeting. If it happens again, then it's documented. If it happens the third time, or at the judgment of the HR manager and with the advice of the supervisor and the executive director, that it is a problem that's not going away, then they may go to termination. But what the policy does is, if someone says, I was wrongfully terminated, you can go back and say, there was a process that was followed, there were multiple interactions, multiple warnings, corrective actions were attempted. So it gives, in the event of litigation, I think it makes it easier to defend the process that the commission followed.
Look, I don't want to dwell on this. It's a policy that I think is the right policy to have. I think easier than what is the question. You could have it straight. Everybody's at will, and there is no policy. If we want you out, you're out. You're still subject to race discrimination, sex discrimination claims. Those never go away. This is better. I just want us to be aware that consistency is essential if we're going to have this policy, and we really need to have the kind of training and the kind of review and the kind of attention to detail and the kind of matching like circumstances with like results that will require a considerable investment to make it work. Otherwise, it's going to be it's not going to be helpful.
We have spoken as the high-performance team extensively about the training needed to implement these policies, and it's a really important piece. So I think there's been discussion, there are plans involved along those lines, and I think everybody recognizes the training piece as essential, and the monitoring piece to make sure that consistency is being adhered to.
If Trupti's not watching this, you might want to just draw her attention to the fact that this was something everybody paid a lot of attention to.
Yes, I will. You know, just as a thought, one thing that I've seen in other organizations is you have periodic reviews. So in this case, perhaps Executive Director Day and Trupti Banda, the manager, HR manager, might sit down quarterly and say, okay, what have we had in terms of performance problems, in terms of corrective actions? How has it been applied? And in that way, kind of keep track of the process and help to maintain consistency of approach as it goes forward.
Anything else? Next.
Okay, the next one is,
Workplace standards. It goes.
sorry, workplace standards.
Right.
Basically, this is, the workplace standard sets out that MGC wants to maintain a working environment that encourages mutual respect, promotes a collegial atmosphere and collaboration between employees, among employees, and is free from all forms of harassment and violence. So this sets basically a general standard for the type of behavior expected in the workplace. There are obviously a number of policies that deal with specific issues, but below that, sexual harassment, violence in the workplace, et cetera. But this essentially sets the table for the rest of those.
And this list actually occurs in your current employee handbook.
And I assume that it does that because the state police, state troopers are not our employees, so the fact that they have firearms is not inconsistent with this policy. Is that
Right,
correct? Is that
right.
That's right.
Okay. Questions? Okay.
Okay, the next one is more of an administrative policy and basically sets out the fact that The Mass Gaming Commission will maintain personnel records in a secure environment. It lists the availability, the right to access to it. It lays out the responsibilities of the HR manager and the general counsel with regard to these policies. And it also establishes the right of employees to have access to their record in accordance with state law.
And this is set by state law. It's very prescriptive, right off the way the law is written.
Okay.
Next one is similar in that it reflects state law that just establishes the policy of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to comply with the law regarding unemployment insurance and the requirements of the Department of Unemployment Assistance.
Okay.
Breastfeeding, this lays out the policy, and again, this is a federal law in this case, but it lays out the Massachusetts Gaming Commission specific policy in accordance with the federal law regarding reasonable break times for mothers with nursing infants.
One of the ones I didn't think about when we first started drafting the, I had a little
You're catching up.
blindside on that
Catching
one.
up with the world, Commissioner.
That's right.
It's what, we talked about this last time, it is amazing when you get into how many different policies you actually need. There are many different circumstances to deal with. The next one is bereavement leave. This lays out the policy that MGC will recognize that employees need the time to grieve in the case of death of a family member. It has definitions for the different types of relationships. There are different numbers of days that an employee has available to them to take time off, depending on the closeness of the relationship, and the policy lays out each of those specifics.
And this actually is, basically, I adapted this from your employee handbook.
In the definitions, it has named partner, but I don't see named partner in the policy anywhere. Am I missing it? Oh, here it is.
It's in
Yes,
the
it is. I'm seeing it.
definitions.
I'm seeing,
Right.
immediate family member.
Right.
Okay, it's within,
And
yeah,
then
got it,
the issue came up, what is a named partner? In
got
the
it.
other lingo you would hear would be significant other.
Right, okay, I missed that, thank you. Okay,
No more questions? Okay. The next one is a background check. Again, this is a process, a procedure that has been in place for quite a while at the Mass Gaming Commission since the first days. This basically builds a policy around that procedure. So it basically says that there will be a background check. It ensures all employees meet the highest ethical standards. It refers to the MGC Enhanced Code of Ethics, which, as we've said before, we think is a best practice, really, in this area for the country. The actual policy lays out the process, how it works, and basically the relationship of the policy to the beginning of employment. In other words, the background check has to be completed before the employee starts with the commission.
questions? There are two places where where the verb is will or shall rather than may, and I just want to make sure that is what we mean. One of them says, conditional candidates who are found to withhold or falsify information that impacts a background check will have their offer revoked and be ineligible for employment, as opposed to may have them revoked. In probably virtually every situation, it would, if you withhold or falsify information, but would we be better off to use the word may rather than will? Commissioner Cameron?
I would say it conflicts with your code of ethics.
Yeah.
That would be my personal opinion.
Well, I mean, a hypothetical, somebody withholds something that they're really embarrassed about, I don't know what,
Or that it's minor, that's a better example.
Okay. But it's an intentional withholding, either because it's a mistaken judgment, they think it's minor, or because it's something that was terribly embarrassing to them. I don't know what it might be. Might there be circumstances, if I'm nitpicking, please tell me, but might there be circumstances where we would want flexibility to be able to consider whether that withholding of information was a firing offense?
Slippery slope.
Doing it sets up another comparative kind of thing.
If you put may, yeah.
Withholding information about your 2 misdemeanor arrests, is that the same as withholding information about your divorce? That seems
Your
to me.
divorce hopefully would not be a consideration for the organization. They shouldn't know you had it, or there was an issue
All
around
right,
it.
so it's a bad example, but the point is
College transcripts versus
Yeah.
misdemeanors.
That's a
Right,
common one,
right.
That you withhold?
that people say they have a degree and they don't, and that is,
Well, that would, yeah.
I think from my perspective is the withholding of a document or information to me is almost more significant than what was withheld itself. I think it really can bring into question a potential employee's ethical boundaries.
I totally
to me,
agree with
think
that.
that's probably clear.
I totally agree with that. It's just a question of whether we want to give ourselves the opportunity to have some flexibility in it. What do you
From my
think?
standpoint, I think this is, I can go either way. This is,
I guess it presupposes that you did not answer a specific question, or did you not fill out a form or provide a document that was specifically asked for? Doesn't it?
Yeah, withhold or falsify.
Right, right.
So it's intentional.
It's well, and it's conscious, not just intentional. It's not as if, well, I didn't realize that you were asking for this.
Yeah, it's not that you forgot.
That you, or that you misunderstood the question, or that you,
You could say something like withhold or falsify material information that impacts the background check. That puts the flexibility in a different place.
You can do that.
yeah, that may be, I mean, I can think of an example, having done this for so many years, looked at background investigations, someone doesn't put an address in because they've lived in 10 different places, so we wouldn't have considered that. That may be to your point about material. Now, will we know if the person, there was something there, we didn't want, for the most part, they say, oh, I forgot, and that wouldn't be something, unless we see a pattern. There are many issues where the person failed to put information down. So maybe material would be sufficient in that we, investigators usually have a good idea of when someone is hiding rather than just, geez, right after college I lived at this address so maybe that would, I would be okay with that material word.
Material, I think, works fine. I think the issue here is if they either omit or falsify a response to a specific material question in the background check. For example, do you have a criminal record? If you say no, and it turns out you've been arrested before, even if there were no convictions or anything like that, that's a significant omission. The falsify is your example of, or Commissioner McHugh's example of, falsifying actually it was yours, Commissioner Cameron, falsifying a graduation record, for example. That also, those are both, in my mind, more material breaches. You are entering false information or withholding pertinent information that would have a significant impact on the hiring decision. Something like, okay, you had 10 addresses and you were evicted from one for loud parties or something, that's probably more borderline. I mean,
So I think we're agreed that if we add the word material, that takes care of it.
yeah.
There's a second one at the last bullet point, but I think this one would not want to be reconsidered. But the MGC, upon careful evaluation, shall disqualify a conditional candidate if any one or more screens in the background check indicates the candidate may pose a risk to the honest and efficient operation of the MGC. And I think that one's probably right. You know, if the MGC concludes that one or more failed screens says that person may pose a risk, that's probably pretty dispositive. So shall, I think, works there. Okay. Anything else? Next.
Next is,
Just one second, just in the background policy on the bottom was the authorization section. We're just going to point out that all it is that this policy is the only draft that had this authorization section. I think it was just our attempt to let you know that will be added to the policies once they're completed and approved by the commission and come for signature.
Right.
And the goal is to have all of the policies so you can go back and reconnect which ones connect to each other.
so they will, and it will include references to applicable state laws and to other policies as some of these policies interact with each other.
Just to, before we move on from background checks, something that just kind of occurred to me is obviously, is there a general theme or a general provision which keeps us consistent with how we're reviewing people who are coming to us, before us for a license to work in a casino? I mean, kind of holding up two different standards would probably not be in our best interest, but I didn't know if that thought or conversation kind of crept into your discussion about the background check.
There will certainly be background checks as it relates to licensing. We haven't discussed that as it relates to this. I don't know if,
We have slightly different standards on each one. I mean, they're not necessarily the same. We do think about where they are similar and where they're not, but there's different spelled out standards in gaming licenses as opposed to employees. Employees have a much more statutorily driven set of standards that we have to comply with. So they won't be exactly the same, but we do consider what we do in both.
I'm just reflecting on the conversation we're having about withholding information, and I think we've probably been more stringent in coming down in the cases that we've seen with the IAB and been pretty tough on those people who are leaving out information. I just want to make sure that to the extent that we can, or the extent that we are consistent with the statute, that we try to be as consistent across the board, whether it's our own employees or, I know what the defining differences are, but it would help, I think it would help our commission work to be as consistent as we can with what we're requiring of others, unless defined by statute. Sorry.
Yep. Okay.
okay, identification badge, again, this builds on an existing procedure that you have, and it creates a policy around the identification badge that you currently have. It lays out the possibility that some employees may be issued additional badges depending on the access requirements to casinos or other places that they may need to get into. The detailed policy lays out, proper use of the badge, what to do if it's lost or stolen. It warns against misuse of the badge. We're not exactly sure whether you could get into private parties or things by flashing an MGC badge, but the idea is that it's used for appropriate reasons only. That's basically it.
What's the, what is the purpose here? Why do we want to require people to carry ID badges? What's the policy objective here?
Well, there's an access requirement to the office itself. So
We have passes that have our name on it. I mean, they have our picture on it.
I would think this is more for people going out into the field, going to one of our licensees and making themselves known as they're walking around the floor of one of our licensees.
I think that's what regulations, it says.
It's a regulation,
Go
right?
into a casino, you have to check in with the state police,
Right.
Yes.
registered. We ought to have a uniform thing, so the state police, as we get big and the state police unit isn't familiar with us all, knows who we are, or see who we are.
And there's restricted areas, there's different levels of restrictions to different areas in a gaming establishment, for example.
Well, I get that, but that's not what this says. What this says is all employees have to carry them at all times. And again, if I'm nitpicking, please say so. But it feels like, I don't like regulations just for the sake of regulations. And why does Becky need to be required to carry her ID? She needs to carry her ID badge if she's going out into the field. That is a legitimate requirement. If you don't have your ID badge, you don't get in. That makes sense. And as a practical matter, you might choose to carry it all the time. But do we want to require everybody to?
Well, we really are talking access to the building right now. That's the badge we're talking about now. So everyone has to have one or else they have to be buzzed in, right? So,
So this will replace the card? Will these replace the card? Our little,
right now, no, we're not talking about an additional ID for where we are right now. We're talking about, and when we get to the new facility, there will be a form of ID as well. That's what we're talking about.
so the badge will also be the thing that you put in front of the door to get in.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about anything additional.
It's the existing badge.
Correct.
Ideally.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
It's this little pass that we have right now?
Yes.
It's the same thing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
But this does lay out the possibility that in the future, additional badges may be required for certain employees for,
That's
types-
very important when the facilities are open, to have that, those additional
I
badges.
misunderstood. I thought that was going to be in addition
No,
to
no,
this.
no, no,
Okay.
no.
Okay, fine. Fine.
Okay? Yep. Okay, the next policy lays out the Employee Assistance Program. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission is in the process I believe in the process of contracting an employee assistance provider at this point, but at any rate, this lays out that an employee assistance program is part of the policies for employees. It gives them the right to confidential professional help for personal problems, job performance problems, family issues, those sorts of things. And the policy lays out the specifics of how that would apply. In the case where someone actually goes, requests the Employee Assistance Program, there's then a detailed program that will be behind that.
Issues? Okay.
Smoke-free workplace, this, again, puts the Mass Gaming Commission in compliance with Massachusetts law as it relates to smoking in enclosed workplaces.
Next.
Sexual harassment, this lays out the policy of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission as it relates to sexual harassment. It lays out definitions of sexual harassment. It gives examples, not intended to be complete, but examples of the types of things that would create a hostile work environment as it relates to sexual harassment. And it lays out the process for handling allegations and conducting investigations when a case is brought to the attention of the HR manager, supervisor, or executive director.
And like personnel records, it's very prescriptive, written in the law, and this basically follows the law.
Okay.
No questions on that? Okay, the next one is whistleblower protection. Again, this follows state statute and others, but it lays out the policy of the Mass Gaming Commission to commit to the highest standards of ethical, moral, and business conduct, obviously in accordance with your code of ethics. MGC employees are encouraged to bring forward any potential issues that might raise concerns in terms of the processes that are being followed or other activities. It lays out basically the process for reporting when there are issues, and it allows, among other things,
whistleblowers would go to the executive director, to the HR manager, or in some cases, they may approach one of the commissioners individually, depending on the nature of the situation. And this basically just kind of lays out the process, and also warns against, kind of
Retaliation.
retaliation and also false allegations.
Okay.
Okay, that is our 14th policy. So that's all we have for this morning.
Great.
Right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
good start. That's great. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great work, team. Can you remind us, in the workflow, we had policies batches 1, 2, and 3,
That's right.
which is where we are up until today. Do we have an idea of next steps, the next
There is
number
the
of
batch.
batches? I know I missed the last meeting, so I apologize for that.
The
but-
batch 4 is bringing forward a couple of policies that the high-performance team was still having discussion about.
Okay,
And I think I've written 3 or 4 policies, don't quote me. And they're all done, and they're being reviewed by Mike Harmon. And then they'll go to Troop Deep before the end of the week, so we should have that batch ready to be reviewed at the next HPT meeting.
Which
Great.
is next Thursday.
great. Which again, I won't be in, but so be it. I'll catch up with you guys.
He's
But-
available
but
by
you'll-
conference.
You'll
call.
definitely get the packet, and if there
You'll
was
have a
anything.
chance, yeah.
I'll have my chance, right?
Will you have an official excuse note, or?
Yes,
Okay, good.
I will be on vacation, actually.
Okay, that's allowed. I think we have a policy on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, would the commission be interested in approving those policies with the change?
Yeah, if you need us to do that, do you need a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
The one change is the addition of material on background
Right.
falsified material information.
Right. Withhold or falsify, right.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I would move that the commission approve the policy statements as presented and discussed here today. Period.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item C.
Item C is a delegation, and Catherine, I think I'll pass this off to you.
This is a delegation of authority to the general counsel to attend those meetings and conferences required by state or federal judicial order. The commission considered this at a prior meeting. I didn't have a memo to put in the package at that point. It came up right before our commission meeting at the time. So I'm just bringing it back before the commission to allow you to take a look at the memo and then vote on it and approve it more formally this time.
Okay.
Entirely appropriate. I see no reason not to move forward with the delegation.
Do you want to move that?
So I move that we approve the request to delegate our general chair to be able to represent the commission at meetings and other events that are appropriate.
General counsel. Further discussion?
Yeah, would you accept an amendment to that? It's general counsel.
Right, not general chairman.
Oh, general counsel, sorry, I do, I accept
I
that
see.
amendment.
Let's say as described in Council Blue's August 21 memo.
So amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it unanimously. We have one other item on the agenda. We were told that it might take about an hour. And as far as I'm concerned, we might as well plow through. But is that all right with everybody? Okay. Item number 5, Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to the agreement the Commission reached with MGM in June of this year, MGM is required to make a monthly report to the Commission regarding its progress and ensuring that it's ready to commence with its project as soon as practicable. This is the second monthly report. MGM provided its first review to the Commission on July 24th. Since that date, both our consultants, Pink & Co. and Director Day, have met with MGM regarding this progress report, and they are here to provide us with the latest. I will ask Jed Nozel, counsel for MGM, to introduce his members and begin the presentation.
Morning, Chairman Crosby, members of the commission. Jed Nozel with Brown Rudnick on behalf of Blue Tarp Redevelopment and MGM Resorts International. As John indicated, we're here for our second monthly update that we, as a condition under our agreement that we reached back in June. I'm just going to do some quick introductions of the team that you'll hear from today, and then we can jump right into things and certainly at any point answer any questions that the commission has along the way. So with us today, and I think we're kind of sitting all over, so I'll ask people just to wave as I go through this. So we have Chuck Urban from Davenport Companies. He's accompanied by Joy Martin, also from Davenport. We have Kevin Dandrade from Tech, also Rebecca Brown from Tech. Mr. Signoli, Christopher Signoli from the City of Springfield, Director of Public Works. Stephen Newbold and Carrie Julian, both from Gensler. And to my right, we have Anita Bird, who is the office manager for MGM Springfield. So today, just to give you a quick overview, we're basically breaking this into two parts. We're going to talk through a document. I believe that's part of your package, which we're terming loosely a work plan that covers all the activities that we're currently engaged in, and will be through certainly the November 4th vote and then onward. And we'll go through an overview of that. Mr. Irving will lead that discussion, answer any questions that you have, and that document, I think, really does illustrate all the different matters that we're currently working on. And then second, we're going to get into a more detailed discussion really on the coordination of the viaduct project. And I think that is certainly sort of what I'll suggest is the foundation of what will drive a lot of the coordination and scheduling, certainly throughout the ultimately the 30-month construction schedule that MGM has presented and the commission has approved in connection with our project. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Irving, and he'll start with an overview of our current work plan.
Excellent. Thank you, Jed. Thank you, commissioners. Can we put the slide up that has the plan? I think I saw it just before this one coming up.
What happened to our slide? Becky, were you?
She's coming.
Okay.
Coming back.
This work plan has been condensed to about 70 line items. And I'm going to try to make this as painless as possible for you. So what I'm going to do today is go through these 70 line items as efficiently as possible. I'm not going to detail the days and the weeks that we plan to do each other. And then after we do that, if I've missed something, or if you have a question about a specific line item, just ask us and we'll take you through exactly what's going on there. Joy and Steve are going to back me up on this because I need their backup on this. To start with, quite a bit is happening relative to Springfield. I think a lot of folks out there were wishing there were cranes and buildings coming down, but even though that's not happening, MGM is working very diligently. Obviously, we have our commission meetings monthly, which are great to keep us in touch with all of you in terms of what we're doing. I think just going through the project planning process, the diversity meetings are one of the most important things that MGM has going on. MGM's participating in workshops and events that provide a forum to interact with firms and allow MGM to reiterate its goals of diversity. Our next one is the CWE Women's Business Leaders Conference on September 12th. I anticipate that every time we are in front of you, we'll tell you about another event that's coming up. This process has been going on for 2 years, and it will continue to occur.
What is the event you just described?
It's the CWE Women's Business Leaders Conference on September 12th, where we're going to be matchmaking in a lot of sessions with various firms in Western Massachusetts. CWE stands for?
Center of Women Enterprises?
Thank you.
pull your mic over there.
In addition to that, we obviously have our design review process with the Gaming Commission. That is going to be everything from the bricks that we're selecting to the parking garage to the larger plan. I can tell you our plan continues to evolve right now, and so we'll be entering that with you probably in September, and we'll continue it on right through until November. The parking coordination, the Springfield Parking Authority, we call it the SPA, is something that we're constantly working on with Chris Signoli. Chris is here today. He's going to be part of our viaduct presentation, and I think he'll update you on that as well. But the coordination is critical given the viaduct construction that's occurring, the displacement of courthouse workers, and the displacement of local businesses. The DOT viaduct coordination, that's going to be part of our larger presentation, and Chris and Kevin will take you through that. PVPC participation, that's the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. PVPC was critical to our surrounding community agreements, and they are probably going to be critical into the look-back provisions that are in those agreements. So we will be working with them, or at least updating them on a monthly basis to let them know what's going on with the project. Community outreach, Anita is thankfully here today, and Anita Bird runs our community outreach program in Springfield. She and her team are in Springfield every single day. So that's just a long lead item on the chart that will just continue to go out. Zoning overlay, we obviously had to get new zoning approved for this project in the city of Springfield. We have, as you know, about 90 tax parcels. And even though we haven't closed on those parcels, every single one of those owners has to sign off and say, yeah, I agree with this zoning overlay. Joy's in the process of that, and that will obviously be finishing up before November, right?
Yes, well before.
Good. City council meeting has to bless it once we have the sign-offs, and that will occur once we have them. The Springfield Historic Commission meetings, as we've mentioned before, we intend to be working with them monthly on this. Presently, we're going through a reconsideration of the site, which Ginsler and Associates, our lead design firm, is taking us on. And we're looking at, I guess, some more creative and aggressive measures to preserve more a building out there. And so I think that will probably be our next discussion with the Springfield Historic Commission.
Which one is that? Which building?
We're looking at 95 State Street. We've done a series of meetings with the Historic Commission related to saving certain facades. This is one opportunity that we've looked at to evaluate the building, to preserve the entire building. It would enhance our sustainability approach as well as speed our construction and lower our impact. So we had to do further evaluation. We couldn't propose it yet, and we're still evaluating that, but we'd like to talk to them about that as an opportunity.
Great.
Remind us, which one is that building? Is that the one with the vault?
No.
With the ceiling? No.
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 It's
That's the Art Deco and interior.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's kind of like a Clark Kent building.
Okay.
Have you
Very
said,
cool.
have you, sorry, have you come up with a strategy to save the art, whatever that was called,
The dome.
the dome? Yeah.
We haven't looked at that. We've been focusing our efforts at the moment on 95. There's a certain series of logistical issues related to 95 because there's mechanical systems in 95 that support other buildings. So we were always trying to preserve parts of that building. We're trying to work through that because that affects our central plant and other systems and the loads on those buildings. So it's a little intricate. We will be looking at the dome and the hotel building. We are looking at some hotel modules that are the appropriate size of the room, if you would, that sets the footprint for the hotel, and that will determine exactly where the building sits in relation to that facade and that dome, as well as looking at optimizing some of the elevators. So there's an ongoing design effort there that's directly adjacent to where the dome is. We've spoken to the Historic Commission about using that dome elsewhere other than exactly where it is, and they're supportive of that, but they need more information. We haven't had a chance to design that because we haven't figured out the rest of the hotel lobby design at this point to place that efficiently.
So you might have the opportunity to take existing elevators and just kind of hate to say, have them go up through the roof and continue on?
No, there's two separate discussions there. The existing building that the hotel, the site where it occupies, is a four-story building. And so the question we've always had is the hotel at 23 stories, we're looking to save the facade to keep the streetscape. But everything beyond about 20 feet back would be removed. And the dome starts at 20 feet. So the Historic Commission was looking at that dome in particular, is that's within your demolition zone. Is there a way to preserve it? They liked the look of the dome itself. The lobby had some details they were interested in, but they realized that given the elevator banks come right down in that area, that would not be possible. So, and since we have to dig out underneath that area for foundations, again, complicating it. They were interested in, can you preserve the dome and the glass and relocate it someplace?
Chuck, you list September, October, November meetings on the chart, but I'm assuming that the conversations and ongoing meetings continue even after these 3 dates on the spreadsheet?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I think especially as we get into surveying items in these buildings that should be retained. You know, it's not just the buildings the commission is focused on, it's the details that we can continue to retain and hopefully make part of the project. So that will go on.
You know, I think we've said this before, but I want to express appreciation again. I think you folks have done a really remarkable job at trying to take seriously the historic preservation. It's usually done, or it's frequently done, you know, just as a throwaway and try to get away as minimum as you possibly can. The relationship with organizations like the HSC are adversarial, and from what I can tell at least, you've really taken it seriously, and I think it's enhanced the projects. I think it makes the project a much more attractive project. That's my own bias, but I really appreciate the attitude that you all have taken towards this, and the fact that now that you've got the de facto award and are still looking to maybe add buildings bespeaks that point.
You know, we're fortunate to have a chairman who got his urban studies degree at Trinity, and every time Jim comes into town, he is sneaking through buildings saying, let's save this, let's do that.
That's great.
He kind of leads the charge on this, and it creates a great environment for us.
Well, pass back our comments.
I will.
That's really good.
I will. Let's talk about MIPA. We had in February told you that we were probably going to be filing the FEIR in September. We've moved that date back to November. The MIPA process, basically, they need to gather all the information about our environmental impact on the state and the surrounding community. I would say that we are primarily done with most of those issues, like traffic and some of the bigger ones, but there are some lower level issues like the historic issue and details like where we're going to put the bus parking up and down Main Street that all fall into that filing. So we will be doing that in November. It does not impact our construction timeline in any way. Utility coordination meetings are handled by our consultant, Allen and Major, sewer and water, electrical, gas, telephone, communications. Those have all been helpful and ongoing. I will tell you that sewer and water, the folks at Bondi's Island have requested a level of completeness in our plan before they give us feedback. So that's been another bit of a delay for us, but we don't see it as a problem. And we've asked John to maybe help us along with that in terms of having them bite off these in smaller increments. Construction permitting, we're constantly in Springfield's building department, as Chris will attest. And what the Springfield building department has asked for has to process this in small chunks. You know, they want to take the parking garage first, and then the hotel, and then the casino, and then the retail, just because with their staff, that's how they need to do it. And we actually like that better as well. Abatement filings, we are obviously going to survey every building for hazardous waste. We're going to be testing soils to see if there's any remediation issues. Anything that we come up with, we have to inform the EPA on. And once we have those findings, we obviously will hit asbestos and other things. Joy has been running that for us, and I don't think you've found anything of critical concern at this point. Demolition permitting, we are going to pull permits on every building we intend to demo, but it's going to happen in sequences. The first part of it will be for the parking garage. And we want to get to work on that area as quickly as possible because, as Chris will tell you, part of our parking plan is to have that garage in place so workers working on the viaduct and our project can both utilize that garage to minimize the impact on the city. And hopefully we can get some courthouse people in there as quickly as possible as well. The mission, we are relocating a men's mission facility, which has been located on Bliss Street for almost 100 years. They're going to be going down the street, and MGM is going to be building them a state-of-the-art and new facility. That is obviously a lead permitting timeline issue for us because we have to build that building before we can relocate these gentlemen and tear theirs down. If you're wondering what our longest lead item is on our process, that one is probably it. So we are going to be jumping on that as quickly as possible and hopefully having them in within the first quarter of 2015. Vendor fairs, we are going to be holding vendor fairs throughout Western Massachusetts. Given the viaduct project and the MGM project and the renovation of Union Station, candidly, we're going to absorb the construction workforce in the immediate Springfield area. So we will be holding vendor fairs all the way out to Worcester. And September 8th is our next vendor fair, which happens in Worcester.
In Worcester, it'll happen. And then we have one in October in Springfield for the Weston Business Expo. And we'll be exhibitors at both of those, as well as future meetings planned with the various Chamber of Commerce in the area.
Mr. Irving, can we go back to your prior activity, the mission building? Is that in the footprint of the parking garage?
No, it's actually on Main Street, but the mission will be located to a site that's now referred to as Orr Cadillac, which is at the very far of the south end in Springfield.
Okay.
Orr Cadillac is about a 25,000-foot building that's been vacant for almost 8 years. And so we're going to purchase that, renovate it, and then hand title over it to the Springfield Rescue Mission.
Right. Okay.
And the Springfield Rescue Mission is a privately funded organization. It is not a government organization.
As Chuck, as we've talked about before, obviously, any vendor fairs where you feel our licensing team can have some impact or participate to help businesses understand licensing requirements as well. Feel free to call upon us to do
We are as concerned about that as you are, and we are already talking to, the folks that have to be licensed. Every time we meet with them, we say, this is something that you should be doing right now. But we're obviously concerned about that timeline. So we're pushing these vendor fairs ahead of time, and I understand, at least I hope, that people working with MGM are in talking to you already.
I think they are, right? Isn't there an MGM meeting?
Yeah, we have a
next
meeting
week,
on Monday with members of our vendor advisory team. But in terms of licensing requirements, helping a small business understand what steps they're going to have to go through, feel free to call upon our people to participate in those events and meetings with you.
Good. Thank you. We're going to have consultants and suppliers ranging from people who do paint and carpet to specialty companies that do curtain walls and parking garages. All of these discussions have in some way already begun and will continue right through November. I anticipate that we'll be awarding a contract to a general contractor and construction manager probably in November. Vendor licensing, Bruce, you hit. We're focused on that. Budget review process, design and programming updates, that's all internal to MGM. That's something that's been ongoing. It's probably been Steve's primary focus for the past month. Sustainability strategy update. As you know, MGM built the largest gold LEED certified project in the country. We're going to be doing the same in Springfield. That is a checklist strategy that Steve will probably be leading you through in September about how we're approaching that and letting you know where we're focusing and where we're not focusing. Parking garage, we'll update you on that. I can tell you in our sequence, the parking garage is going to be the first thing that will be built, as I've mentioned. Demolition documentation for select buildings, that goes back to the building department again, and Joy will be working on that with that team. Geotech and engineering, that's ongoing right now. You know, we don't know whether our pilings are going down 50 feet or 100 feet, or we're going to be doing spread footings in some areas. Those are the things that we're focused on right now, and it goes right back to Steve's budget that he's trying to work on. The construction development schedule, we're still holding firm at 30 months. So that's based on when we hopefully get a green light on November 4th. Preliminary logistics plan in terms of how we are sequencing this, when roads will be closed. We'll come into you in September and October and take care, really walk through that one bit at a time. It's so important for the viaduct. And Kevin will say this, I'll say it now, we can't have a casino open with a highway closed. So sequencing all of this, you know, and how we build it over time is unbelievably important. I can tell you that Michael O'Dowd and his team from DOT have been incredibly proactive about meeting with us almost every single month since March on this. And so the two teams are working together like that, and I expect that will continue.
We've had Ombudsman Ziemba not only has, as you know, personal experience in this area, as you know, but also has very good relationships, and we've got very strong commitments from all the executive branch agencies, but particularly DOT, to be helpful. And it sounds like it's going to be great, but if there are ever any issues, obviously, let us know, because everybody agrees with everybody else that is a really critical juncture.
I appreciate that, and I want you to know it goes both ways. If there's something that we can do for the viaduct in terms of our coordination, we're going to do it. Michael and I have said to each other specifically, our contracts with our general contractors are going to have exhibits that reflect when the streets close, and they're going to match up. And you know, thankfully, I see that he's probably going to be signing a contract in December, which is right around the time that we'll be doing it as well.
Great.
The church relocation, as you probably know, we're relocating a historic church that's currently on Bliss Street. A lot of folks in the city of Springfield are looking forward to seeing how we do this. I am too.
I think everybody is. It's absolutely fascinating.
So as soon as we figure that out, I'll let you know.
That wasn't part of the prepared remarks.
I think we'll be having our commission meeting in Springfield.
We're going to bring our lawn chairs sit on the sidewalk as this thing goes by.
Once we've nailed down our final contract with our contractors, we will have a final logistics plan. And so I expect that we'll come into you in November, December, and literally show you the exhibits that will be attached to these contracts saying, this is the timing and this is how it's going to work. Soils and borings test, we already talked about that. Building hazmat surveys, as I said, Joy is all over that. And salvage surveys, you know, that refers to everything that, you know, we can retain on this site for future use. You know, for example, the Zanetti School, which we purchased, is condemned because of tornado damage, but it has 60 8-panel oak doors, which are irreplaceable, and we intend to take each one of those out, and they will probably be the doors that go onto our apartments, and we will label them as the Zanetti School doors.
That's great.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
That's great.
I appreciate your patience. That's our list.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's
I would
really good.
love to use this going forward as our beginning to each meeting, meaning we put this up, and I will not take you through 70 items at each meeting, but we will address what has changed or what's new and should be on that, and you may come back and say, you know, today I'd like to talk about item number 20, you know, and we'd be happy to do that.
Right, and I just wanted to add, Commissioner, to give Nancy and Michael our appreciation, certainly in helping us develop this from Pink. That was certainly helpful, and that level of contact that we've had just about, I won't say daily, but several times a week has been good in helping us put this together, and I think convey this type of information to the commission.
Let me just say to you all what we've said to Penn National, which is, we're new to this game, and we certainly are committed to making sure that the critical variables that we have selected you for are met and are met on time and so forth. But we don't want to get in the way. We don't want to be a pain in the neck. We don't want to be obstructionist, and we don't want to be nitpicking. And so, we need to find the proper balance for what's an appropriate level of oversight. And we're perfectly open to talking about it. And if as time progresses you feel like it's too much, say so, and we'll talk about it. But
I appreciate that, and I'd like to echo what Jed said. Michael and Nancy have been very helpful in making this a smooth process, and Rick overseeing all of us has been great as well.
Good.
So the one thing I do want to mention is we have a lot more things going on than 70 line items. So, I don't care if it's the movie theater or the armory. If you've got a specific question, never hesitate to ask. And if we don't know the answer, we'll tell you, but we'll get it for you.
Great, thank you.
With that,
I just wanted to echo the chairman's appreciation for the sensitivity you have to the surroundings. This is really, it's a project that I am really eager to see develop because of its potential, and you, I think, are realizing its potential. The idea of saving the doors out of the school and using them for the apartments is the kind of detail and attention to history and the locale that I think is going to make this a really first class. It always had that potential. Your enthusiasm was infectious when we were looking at it and collectively, and it's being realized, and I think it's really, we're off to a great start. I'm really very happy to hear this.
thank you. I've never been involved in a project like this before, so I'm right there with you. I can't wait to see this come together.
Well, this is a perfect example of doing well is doing good when you've got one of the major candidates for governor saying even if the referendum were successful, the ballot initiative were successful, he would consider an initiative to put the Springfield back on. I mean, that just says a lot about what outside observers make of this project as well. So you're getting something back for what you're putting into this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the comments.
Just out of curiosity, totally just out of curiosity, what would you be doing if it weren't for the issue of the ballot initiative, so that we've sort of suspended certain things? What would be different?
Right now, we would be preparing the pad for the parking garage, and meaning we would be selectively taking down specific buildings. And that's what you'd see, really, right now.
But I don't see on November 5th, the day after the thing is done, that starts. There's nothing, I don't see any, I was expecting to see some trigger points in the first week of November that said, assuming all goes well, bang, these things start to happen.
I think we will put that on the next date, but literally, I wanted to tell you that first because, some people express concern. For example, our MEPA filing is going to be delayed, which means our approval won't happen until 2015, and how can you demolish buildings when you don't have all your approvals? That's very standard for Massachusetts development. In fact, our last mall in Springfield that we purchased, we took the mall down for Stop and Shop and Lowe's before we had all of our approvals, just because it sped up the process. So part of staying on our 30-month schedule is by moving forward aggressively like that. We certainly wouldn't do it if we had any concerns about approvals, which we don't with this project.
Okay.
And to your prior question, Mr. Chairman, there's a number of activities that follow under pre-construction here that, as Mr. Irving is alluding to, they will continue to fill up as we approach those dates.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add, Chairman, what we're doing here is really trying to create a unique reporting requirement over, this 4-month period, and in no way substitute what I think will be our requirements under your regulations once sort of that kicks in November, and certainly there'll be a different level of detail and similar to what you've seen from certainly what's happening in Penn once we kick into the Section 134, I think, process.
What about this project keeps you awake at night?
I got to say this on TV.
5 commissioners, I guess.
No, a typical developer is worried about things going on underground that he doesn't know about, and that's just standard. And in all development, it's what hole haven't you dug and what pipe haven't you looked at. We can't afford to open a casino where a pipe bursts, a month later. And so we need to be exploring every bit of that. And part of our current phase is literally getting into the ground and probably putting cameras down some pipes that may be 100 years old and saying, how do these look? Do we have to replace them? The soils, whether I go down 50 feet or 100 feet with pilings, that's a big number. And that's the type of thing where Steve and I have to say, okay, let's hope we got this right. So we are physically into it right now, and we're qualifying all of that. Nothing will change what you've seen or what we've committed to. But in terms of how this building goes up, there are always unknowns when you're dealing with an urban project that hasn't been excavated for 100 years.
Interesting. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
all.
So with that, I'm going to stand up and give my seat to Chris and Kevin. And they're going to go into the viaduct. And what I want you to know is Michael O'Dowd has been so critical, and most of these slides that you're going to see have come from Michael and the DOT team. And Kevin's going to take you through the project. Chris is going to tell you how the city is coordinating. And then if there are any follow-up questions about how MGM integrates, I'll be happy to answer those.
All right. Well, you exchange, while you guys exchange seats, we'll take a very quick break.
Great.
We are back in business. Want to introduce your team?
Sure. Well, I think I did already, but I'll let Kevin and Chris, if they want to just say hello back to the commission again.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Kevin Dandreed. I'm a principal and senior project manager with TEC.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chris Signoli, DPW Director for the City of Springfield.
Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us today. What we'll be showing you today, the first part of it is going to be a summary, an abridged version of what Mass DOT used as part of their design public hearing that they had presented to the public several months ago as they kicked off the viaduct project in a design state. So it was beyond the planning state, but it was more of the design details and the ideas about traffic management and things such as that. As Chuck has mentioned, we've had a great collaborative process for coordinating with Mass DOT and with the city as we all get better definition as these designs have advanced to what's really going to happen. And as I sit before you today, there's wonderful news to share as far as the sequencing of these projects, how they're fitting together. And in a different world, if they were going to do this project 3 years from now, it wouldn't make sense. But what we have in front of us is a great opportunity where 2 projects are being constructed at the same time, and that based on the Mass DOT's estimates and schedules, this will be done before the opening. So it's fitting in wonderfully at this point. We've had dozens of meetings and conference calls with Mass DOT staff, folks like Michael O'Dowd, the project manager, who's responsible for the entire viaduct project, Executive Director David Moeller, his team in the Office of Transportation Planning, Al Stegman and Rich Massey from the District 2 office, who are the folks on the ground that deal with the communities every day and have to advance these projects through construction. There's been a lot of stakeholder coordination, and as Chris will describe, one of the elements that we'll talk after the viaduct is the parking coordination and what's available to us both on the public and the private side, which is great news for having adequate parking supply for all the things that will be going on or the interim disruptions that we have in reference to the courthouse. We are planning a meeting specifically with the courthouse. It's likely to be the second week in September, so that we can understand from them and hear the specific concerns and issues, talk about the strategies. Chuck, Rebecca, and I, Rebecca Brown from our office, we had a chance to host some of the prospective general contractors that MGM is looking at and talk about the transportation items, the need for coordination with Mass DOT, the things like transportation demand management, which is trying to get people out of their cars. And it's not just once the project's built, but looking for the contractor to have very specific plans that he can share with us and with the commission eventually for managing traffic during construction, employee-related construction traffic. So Rebecca, if you could advance. As far as the viaduct specifically, there is unquestionable need as far as the why perform a project. Many of you, if you had seen it from the site visits that we did with the Gaming Commission up in Mr. Picknelly's office on the top floor, and you look down at the viaduct and you can see the patchwork of rehab improvements that have occurred. It's that series of patchwork in that deck, or the concrete surface of that elevated structure, has been compromised over time. It's become a significant maintenance burden for Mass DOT, and thus there's the need for a significant reinvestment in that facility. So you can see evidence of the patchwork here, the broken concrete almost getting through the deck here, evidence on the underside. The great news about the facility itself is that the superstructure, or the steel and the concrete that holds up this viaduct, is in remarkable condition. They have to do some painting, but a lot of that is done after the deck replacement when it doesn't affect traffic. As far as the limits of the viaduct project, what we've done as an adaptation of MassDOT's slides is they had the limits of the project here, but we superimposed the limits of the MGM site just to put it in perspective. North is to the left. This is 291 and 91. Exits 6 and 7 in this area. The limits of that elevated structure that will be rehabilitated. Next slide. The scope from Mass DOT starts with the advertisement of the construction project. That's expected the middle of September, just a few weeks away, where they will put it out in Central Register for this large contract that's currently valued at approximately $230 million. That is expected to go to the award to the contractor after the bidding process in December of this year. And that will include deck replacement, or that concrete surface that everybody rides on, the painting of the steel and other minor structural rehabilitation underneath the concrete deck, improved bridge drainage, new highway lighting, and then other things related to the merge and diverge area between 91 and 291. But as part of each of the phases, and we'll show you some examples in a moment, comprehensive traffic management during construction. It's going to be the same for Mass DOT as it will be for us. We anticipate bi-weekly meetings that we will be able to understand where each of us are on an ongoing basis during construction to know how one affects the other. As part of the viaduct project, they are using what's called ABC techniques, or accelerated bridge construction techniques. The most recent and probably positive example of this is the Fast 14 projects that you may have driven over and probably not been delayed by, thankfully, with what was a seamless process for Mass DOT in using these same techniques to replace 14 bridges on I-93 just north of Boston. That is the scale of what we're talking about here, similar techniques where the major pieces of the infrastructure are constructed off-site, prefabricated, and then brought to the site. So rather than have a gazillion concrete trucks show up through the process, a lot of that concrete and steel work is done off-site, and then there are heavy lifts onto those sections of the viaduct. This allows for great efficiencies. It can reduce the number of stages or phases of construction, and it is going to be approximately half of the time to construct this project as it would be with conventional phasing and conventional construction.
What does it do to cost? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
What does it do to cost, this ABC strategy?
Well, as it relates to cost, time is money, so that to be able to do things in an organized way will usually reduce costs as well, because anytime you get into multiple additional phases of work, you have additional, not only potential for delay with those phases, but also the risk. And the risk is not just for Mass DOT or the contractor, but for the general public that has to go through a work zone for that much longer. And the really undocumented dollars of people getting delayed on their way to work, or business products going from one place to another. So this is being used more and more, and MassDOT has done a wonderful job as, what they deem We Move Massachusetts, in really doing it in a coordinated way, in a very visible way, as they've done with the hearing process, to make sure the public is aware of what's coming. And part of that is going to be managing traffic during construction, just like any other project. It's just going to be done in a condensed time period.
But it's not particularly a cost-saving tool. It's a time-saving tool, which incidentally is a cost-saving tool oftentimes, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And as we'll get to in a few slides, there are incentives for the contractor as well to maintain or, get done early, that schedule.
This doesn't have anything to do with our jurisdiction, but I've watched the I-93 thing at a very high level. How does it work if you leave the infrastructure, the steel in place? You take new prefab hunks of slabs of concrete and overlay it over the...
Yeah, and I'll actually have a couple exhibits that'll show you just that.
Looking forward to that.
As we deal with traffic, and when I say we, it's really a collaboration of all entities. Chris has spent considerable time, as we have, as he represents the city as DPW director, in better understanding how things will occur. And Chris, do you want to describe the survey that was conducted?
Sure. When Mass DOT started this process, they held two public hearings. One was in February 25th and one was on May 20th. As Kevin mentioned, we had a number of meetings at the DPW in Springfield where we brought a lot of businesses in. And there were a lot of assumptions on any sort of project like this that you make about traffic flow and number of people and parking and where they get on and off the highway that are buried inside of the basic traffic numbers. So what Mass DOT decided was to put a survey together and advertised it everywhere, sent it out to all of the area businesses, and basically trying to exactly figure out the behavior of people and how this project may affect them and how the design elements need to be brought into it. We wanted to identify the patterns, the routes, the behaviors of the commuters, and really to prove and disprove some of the assumptions that have been made. Survey was done in April of May of 2014 and received over 3,000, just about 3,000 responses, excuse me. It was distributed to, as I mentioned, to all of the businesses in the city. It was on our city's website. It was on Mass Live's website, our local paper, numerous articles in the paper as well. We wanted to know all aspects about the commuters. And really what it confirmed with us was how traffic patterns really work in the city. The major commuters come from the north, south, and east, not as much from the west. But really what it said is, I think it was 80% of the people responded work in the city of Springfield. So it really impacts them, how they get on and off the highway. And 60% of the people have a commute of less than a half hour, which obviously in Boston we don't see that a lot, but it's in Springfield, that means that people who are used to quickly going back and forth to work, and traffic is not being a major issue. So making sure that when we started to put into the design these items, that we weren't going to all of a sudden be doubling and tripling people commute through the city. So it really, the survey results really did was confirmed a lot of the assumptions that we had made and allowed us to really focus in on much more specific improvements in the city and on the ramps, et cetera, but really focused in on what improvements need to be done in the city to make sure that the commuters within the city be able to get back and forth within the city very well and be able to get back on the highway when they need to at the time. 1/3 of the traffic that uses Route 91 only uses it for an exit or 2 or 3. They get on, they get off, they get on, they get off, they get on, they get off, because of the way that the system is in the city with the frontage roads. So if we've been able to modify a lot of the frontage roads to be able to handle additional traffic, to get some of that traffic off of the highway, to be able to utilize less lanes that will be on the highway during construction. So it really, the survey information really, really helped with Mass DOT, with their designers and with the city.
And there's certain elements as far as the baseline understanding of what needed to stay during construction. 2 lanes on I-91 at all times during those peak commuter times, because to pinch it below 2 lanes of through capacity in each direction would result in very long backups. So that was one of their premises, maintaining access between I-91 and 291 at all times, between that interchange. Looking at the interaction between the ramps themselves, the off-ramps and on-ramps, because, and you'll see in a moment, during certain phases, there's not as much room to merge or diverge into traffic. So with that in mind, there are certain ramps that will be closed for the duration of both phases of construction. And those are the types of things that we've been coordinating with them on, is understanding how our trucks may get to the site, how they will leave by various routes, various options, so that it's all predictable and it can be presented to the contractors. And as Chris mentioned, some of those detours off the highway are on facilities that are already used as such, the frontage roads of the Hall of Fame Ave or East Columbus going northbound, that helps shed some of the burden of that traffic off of 91. What's up in front is a graphic. Again, we show superimposed where the MGM site is. This is the same graphic that Mass DOT used in the design public hearing. What's shown in red here are the ramps between exits 6 and 7 that will be closed during construction, and that traffic will be redistributed with guide signs to other adjacent exits. During the first phase, they will be occupying the middle of the viaduct to reconstruct that, and the travel lanes will be pushed to the outside of the highway, maintaining 2 at each time. That is stage 1. It's the first major phase. Once that's completed, they will adjust the portable concrete barriers and restripe it. Traffic will now use the inside, and they'll work on the outer extents of that elevated structure. Other things like temporary ramp openings up near Route 20 and traffic signals here and there are all part of it to try to maintain the flow of traffic. This just shows you a cross-sectional view. They're going to be occupying the middle of the viaduct, so there's a concrete barrier here on either side. They will take off the deck in this location, clean the steel underneath, which is in great shape. So they will be removing that concrete. And it's the replacement of that concrete surface that will go on top of the existing beams and girders, the steel structure here, that can be done in a much more efficient way. So you say, okay, we're going to demolish all of this existing concrete decking, get it ready and tied in with the adjacent structure, and then bring in these heavy lift pieces that will be done in sections. So it's a much cleaner, quicker way of replacing that deck surface.
Instead of pouring on site.
Exactly. And that's what, with conventional construction, takes significantly longer. Time for cure before you can work with it, be on it, to ensure the strength of that concrete. The next phase, again, we come into the middle, and they adjust the barrier, and then they're working on the outside. So 2 major stages, and just before that occurs, there are some things, whether it's upgrading signals and technology and detection, looking at cameras for monitoring traffic, all those things that will be done as a precursor. Police details at critical locations, the monitoring program, counting traffic to understand, regardless of the survey, which is wonderful information, what's happening on the fly with data. The monitoring cameras, traffic management system, so looking at the variable message boards on the highway that may say, use exit 5 or use exit 9, use exit 2 on 291, other options to alert traffic. And then being able to respond to incidents quickly. You see the service vehicles on the highway in many locations today, the spokes around Boston. Being able to respond to incidents quickly, attend to the situation, get it cleared, and get traffic moving. Major milestones for dates. Again, project advertisement, middle of September, awarding it in December. They're going to begin with some of these surface improvements in February, and that first major stage of construction will probably occur June, July of 15. They're looking to complete both stages and have traffic on 91 flowing again with all the lanes that are there today, but with a brand-new deck by early spring of 17. With a 30-month calendar for the construction of this project, if it starts in November of this year, then we're talking about May of 17. So things are lining up very well. There's been intense coordination on various phases of construction. They will have a lot more detail with specific plans that they go through with their successful low bidder on the project. So this is going to be an ongoing coordination element, not just until the GCs are brought on board, but bi-weekly after that as well. Again, that's just talking about the coordination that will be conducted over the next many months.
Does DOT anticipate only one contractor, one solicitation? Or
I believe so.
are there different ones?
I think it'll be advertised for one contract, and that general contractor, I would expect, would manage several subcontractors in many different disciplines.
Does this have any impact or bearing on some of the MGM improvements that have been discussed for the rotaries on the other side of the river? I mean, I see people probably foregoing going up 91 and scooting over Route 5, which has a lot of its own construction issues, but MGM has talked about making a lot of roadway improvements on the Route 5 side to better direct traffic. Is there alignment with those?
Yeah, actually, there is a separate Mass DOT project for the Memorial Rotary. That is on a fast-track design-build process as well. It's not expected to impact lanes for much of the time that they prepare for the work, but the actual replacement of the bridge that goes over Route 5 right there at the westerly end of the Memorial Bridge is expected to occur over 2 long weekends. So as far as the big picture of things, we've talked with them about if we have to limit trucking to our site during those 2 weekends, so be it. We have plenty of time to prepare. So that's an ongoing project for them, and the consultant that Mass DOT or the contractor has for that design build project there just happens to be the same consultant for the viaduct project. So there's good coordination automatically.
Thank you.
This, you're obviously much more tuned to this than we, but given that the target date for the DOT project is May of 17, and you're planning to open on or about May of 17, if I were in your seat, I'd have a little heartburn that there's no slip time in there. I mean, I wouldn't want to stake my life on that May 17 success date.
Yeah, and actually, they had put spring 17 as far as the Mass DOT schedule, but based on what we've seen and we've talked about, I expect it to be very early spring. So we should have a few months of overlap, of buffer there. One thing I mentioned earlier in the presentation is that consistent with other ABC projects that Mass DOT is doing, they are extremely likely to put great incentives in place in the contract to stay on schedule or finish early. And those are the things that will be formulated within their contract documents that they'll be putting out for advertisement and bidding. But those have been well received in their fast-track projects like Fast 14 in the past. So I have no doubt that that will be consistent with this scale of project as well.
The other item I wanted to bring up is that the intent of based upon the ABC construction method they're using and how they anticipate the project to move, whether it's moving north to south or south to north, as they're in the final stages of it, as they're moving that final stage, that roadway then becomes open. And then you're dealing with a much, much smaller construction area to a point when you're almost complete with the project, the roadway's almost open. It's not going to be all of a sudden one day that you only have 2 lanes and then at the end of the project we have to wait. So as they move forward on it, a lot of this stuff is going to get going. Simply by the way that we're using the ABC method, it's going to have to move that way. And as we're doing it, the ramps that we've talked about have been closed, where most likely some of them will be able to be opened. Right. So traffic will be able to flow a lot better.
Yeah, good. Well, that's reassuring. Might throw in some free play incentives or something in there too, since so important for you guys as well.
Do you anticipate, or perhaps is it early to tell, that labor would be a constraint, that some of the, that you would be competing for a lot of the same workforce with the contractor?
We've talked about the labor pool at times. It's something that each party is aware of. But one of the benefits of it is that the benefits of both projects going at the same time extends further within the Commonwealth. I mean, it's a significant benefit for the labor pool in the valley and in the region, but it's also, it's going to have great effects for job creation that we expect will, further extend. So it's great news for the Commonwealth as far as the benefits of having two large-scale projects going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a big enough labor supply in the immediate Springfield area, and our strategy is to dive deeply into the Worcester labor pool. And as Kevin said, that's great, because that spreads out the benefit.
Great.
I just want to note, this is why I might be late to a few meetings over the coming year or two.
No, I just heard there's going to be no slowdown.
Right. Nice try, Commissioner. You've been busted.
So one of the things that's intricately tied with the viaduct and our project is the idea of parking and parking accommodations during construction. Chris is going to speak for a few minutes as to some of the data, some of the information and strategy around parking accommodations.
Sure, and just as a little history on myself, I have been with the city of Springfield for 5 years. I've been a lifelong resident. Prior to working with the city of Springfield, I worked on the private side. Our biggest client was the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, and performed all of the traffic projects related to their development down in Ledyard, Connecticut. So the idea of dealing with a casino development within trying to keep obviously it's in a much more rural area, but the idea of how the process works, the construction, the phasing, et cetera, and what they are trying to move forward with is very much in the area that I've dealt with over the years. So when we started looking at this project and the other developers who were interested in Springfield, the traffic circulation, et cetera, was something I had dealt with before. And when we started bringing what they were doing there into the city end, we had to start looking at things such as trucking routes, vehicle detours, and just lay down areas, construction areas. When you're in a big rural site, you have all sorts of areas to be able to put this stuff down. In the city, it's a little difficult. Parking has really become the major item in the city, as well as how the construction phasing is going to occur. The details of things such as bus stops and pedestrian access is more of a construction-related idea to making sure that we have people can get from point A to point B without having to be detoured a lot. One of the unique things that has happened in the past couple weeks, if you could just change the slide, Rebecca. Just to get an idea what we were looking at in the city, and some of the next slides with regard to routes coming in and out, but just a little bit on the parking. A lot in the city, we kind of have three different parking. We have parking that is run by the Springfield Parking Authority, parking that is private, parking authority stuff which is shown on this slide in green, private parking which is not really shown, that are lots that you pay and then somebody else runs it. And there are a number of locations that people just have parking lots as part of their business. What we have been getting from those people who are just businesses that have parking lots are requests to open what are called open-air parking lots, being able to charge for parking. They have excess parking on their site, so all of a sudden an additional number in the city center have now become available for some of these businesses to rent out to adjacent businesses, et cetera, in the area. So we've been starting to get those requests. Just to talk about parking, the Springfield Parking Authority has about a little bit over 1,000 parking spaces in downtown Springfield, basically in the city center. The MGM site here, and as you can see, everything's really to the north of it anyways. I'm just going to put the pointer right there. That is a large flat parking area that probably has about 400 parking spaces. There is a lot down here that has about 250. Tower Square, which is right here, has about 300. inside their facility, and each one of those, we're probably at a rate of about 60% or so on a lot of those lots, and then there's others spread around the area. So we're looking at probably another 1,200 parking spaces in the city, exclusive of the Springfield Parking Authority, that we know people can be absorbed in as as different things happen. And as I mentioned in the last meeting and spoke some time with the Springfield Parking Authority and some of the private lots as well, is getting them, if people are going to be having to move from a particular location, whether it is on the MGM site or whether it is underneath Route 91, which I'll talk about in a second, was getting those people now, getting them into I don't want to use the word contract, but getting them into their monthly rate so that they're moving, not all of a sudden showing up one day and finding that something is closed, that there's a little bit more advanced notice on it. Underneath 91, right here, there are two parking garages, north garage, south garage. A majority of those have been closed for 6 to 8 months simply because of the deterioration of the deck of I-91. Pieces were falling off, falling on cars, so Mass DOT had to perform a lot of work, screening, et cetera, to be able to just get some of those spaces back open. So we've been dealing with a little crunch with that. About 2.5, 3 weeks ago, one of those pictures that Kevin showed you of deterioration in the highway, about a 3x3 section of the area collapsed in the middle lane southbound. Number of cars hit it, obviously blew out tires, blew out suspension. Mass DOT had to come in, close the upper deck of the parking garage on the south end here to be able to get all its equipment in. Took them about 2 days to get it fixed. That's probably about the 5th or 6th time something like that has happened over the past 6 or 7 years. So that sort of thing will just continue to happen if the deck is not fixed. And obviously putting in peril people are here. So from a parking standpoint, with the MGM site, with the first thing that they're going to be doing is building the parking garage, which basically sits around here. And then a lot of the remainder of the site, even though it's shown as a giant square, there's a portion of the site here that is surface parking that isn't going to be touched as part of the development. So, and just to orientate everybody, the building that's right there is the courthouse. So a lot of the courthouse parking occurs here, some of it occurs here, and some of it occurs in some of the other areas as well. So that was the meeting that Kevin was going to be talking about. The thing that was very interesting to us in looking at the parking was also access. If you want to go back to the first slide, Rebecca, was looking at how trucks, construction vehicles were really going to be getting in and out of the site. We looked at the major routes into the city. This first one basically talks about to and from the south. And to and from the south to the site really isn't going to be a problem. Ramps are open. Ramps are going to remain open during the entire construction project. There's no issue with it. A vehicle can get off of Route 91 in a couple of different locations, go to the site, come back down, get back on 91 along the frontage road in a couple different locations, and then follow 91 to the south, and however it gets distributed to the south. So other than maybe some volume on the highway, there really isn't an impact to the vehicles from the south. Rebecca? To and from I-91 North and I-90 West, the turnpike, and way off the map up here, obviously the turnpike goes north-south, or excuse me, east-west, and those vehicles would be coming into the city from this direction. Being able to get to the site, there's a couple different ways to do it. We have a frontage road that runs parallel to the highway so they can get to MGM, or depending upon the size of the vehicle, they just travel through the construction zone, get off at the next exit. We have a loop around ramp that doesn't even have to enter an intersection. It's its own ramp, can loop right around and get to the site. Vehicles exiting the site can then just hop on our frontage road and travel to the north and get back on Route 91 North, eventually to the turnpike. There is a small pinch point right here, the railroad. There is a little bit of a low overpass there that some oversized vehicles that may be coming to the site may have some difficulty. Those vehicles can just travel to the south, get on Route 5, travel in West Springfield on a highway section, cross over the North End Bridge, not have to deal with any sort of height restrictions, lane restrictions, et cetera, and be able to do that. So from the north and from the west, we think we have that all worked out. Rebecca, vehicles that are coming from the east will enter the city through Route 291, most likely getting off at the Turnpike, the Springfield exit and the Turnpike, which is actually in Chicopee. Coming into the city, one of the unique things here is that the ramp that is going to be worked on as part of the project is extremely wide. It's probably 2.5 lanes wide, and it's only striped for 1 lane. So when they're doing work on 291 on the ramp on the corner here, we really don't anticipate any sort of pinch point, and that the work that's coming in on the lane that's coming in on off of 291 will be its own lane for all of the construction. So I anticipate a decent flow of traffic being able to get to the site, and again, they will just travel down, loop back around, and come to the site. Coming out of the site, the smaller vehicles, smaller trucks can just travel along East Columbus. There's a number of roadways here that they can take and hop back on 291. Oversized vehicles can take the same route that I was talking about before in West Springfield. Over the bridge, right here, there's an entrance ramp to get onto 291, and they are all set there. Route 5, as we're talking about in this area, is essentially a highway section. It is not a local section of roadway. It's 2 lanes in each direction. And we are, the only time that you are at any sort of local type road is right here, which it's 4 lanes wide for probably, if that, a quarter mile maybe at the most. And that is in the city of Springfield, which we control. So the other unique thing with regard to access, parking, traffic, is that in a number of locations along the corridor as part of the project, Mass Highway was installing real-time cameras with access by the city of Springfield so that we can access with Mass DOT if there's backups in certain areas, if trucks are causing a clog problem in a particular area, and just being able to monitor traffic overall to go to the contractor and/or our personnel to start looking at timing of signals on frontage roads, so to be able to do real-time work and not just sit back and say, oh, that was a lousy, month, maybe we got to do something. We will be able to make the changes on the fly. So from a parking standpoint, as we've delved into it a lot more, we're getting a lot more comfortable that available parking is there, and that there are other spaces, in the process for finding other spaces is in process, and trucks being able to get in and out of the city for both the 91 project and the MGM project. We're very comfortable that these processes will be able to be followed and not be running people through the city center with 75-foot long trucks with carrying precast T-sections. So we're very comfortable with that. Their location provides us some unique access to the highway. So we're very happy about that. Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything to it.
As it relates to parking and the coordination with our abutters, where parking is sensitive, we will be temporarily displacing about 600 spaces. And as Chuck mentioned earlier, our parking facility is going to be the first phase of on-site construction, which tries to get those spots back in as soon as possible. But one of the other conversations, along with traffic management during construction and the coordination with Mass DOT, is a very specific shuttle program to some of these other outlying parking facilities that can be used for the courthouse and others that are accustomed to having that parking right next door, to make sure that it's efficient, snappy operation with great service to those front doors.
I think the only thing I'll add is, this is an urban project. And if you look at building a high-rise in downtown Boston or building 5 million square feet in South Boston, it's a lot more complicated than what we're doing. It's too bad that Springfield isn't occupied right now. Most of the buildings are largely vacant. The upside of that is we're not disturbing people, and it gives us a lot of good staging areas to get this project done.
Great. Thank you.
Questions, comments?
No, it's very impressive. It's clearly that you've thought a lot about, there's been a lot of planning already done by multiple parties, not just the folks at MGM, but clearly the city and DOT, and it's great to learn about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you know if DOT would make those cameras available to the commercial traffic reporters and the websites and stuff?
We're trying to work with them on the protocol to who's going to have access to them. And it ends up being more of a IT issue than it does, do we want to do it? Trying to make sure of where it's tied in, because the intent initially, it's going to be tied into the, lack of a better term, the contractor's trailer, so that the Mass DOT personnel can monitor it. It's also tied back into our office up on Tapley Street, so that we can real-time monitor it with other cameras that we have in the city as well. It becomes an IT issue of how we get it out to the different locations, having it be a camera that's also available on Mass DOT's website, that sort of thing. That's kind of the detail stuff that we're working through right now, because in the end, in downtown Springfield right now, there are 3 cameras, I think, that Mass DOT has up. The ones that are going up here are a different type and style, meaning that we have, it's when real time, rather than being a little bit more jumpy, these are a little bit more flowing to be able to monitor traffic, better resolution, et cetera. So we're really kind of working through some of the IT stuff. It's going to be coming back, all the wiring is going to be coming back to most likely to City Hall, and how we distribute it. We're just trying to figure out how we can physically get it there. I don't think we have any limitation on where it can go, or where we want it to go. It's just a matter of, can we get it there?
Well, you can always get it there, or somebody else can, and the commercial folks could pay for it if there was a huge cost, but it's just, it's sort of in the nature of the detail, but it is something that people find tremendously useful.
Oh, absolutely.
And over time, DOT has become much more willing to let this kind of information out, and I hope, or certainly encourage you to encourage them to make it available to commercial providers and websites and so forth.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You have personal knowledge of that history, right,
I do.
Mr. Chairman?
I do. Okay, any other
really good.
questions,
Really
comments?
very
Yeah,
comprehensive.
terrific. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Great report. Really pleased. Please, as I said, pass back our appreciation.
All right.
Right.
All right.
Good job. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ombudsman Ziemba, is that the end of it for your item? That's it. I think that we have no other business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.